Remember the Sam Harris of old? I remember that guy. Remember this guy? William Lane Craig, 11 years ago? I mean, Christians hated this guy in this debate. Well, hate's too strong a word. Thought he was strawmanning and fallacy this, fallacy that, doesn't understand Christianity, terrible, terrible, terrible guy, doesn't understand anything. And then remember him on Bill Maher with Ben Affleck? I mean, he offended Ben Affleck greatly. And this one, he offended Christians greatly. Seems like he's a little different now. It seems like he's a little more scared to offend people nowadays. Anyhow, so I'm going to listen. I haven't listened to the one where he's on Lex Fridman. But I want to listen to some of that. But I'm feeling nostalgic today. It's cloudy here in Arizona. It's just about to rain. It's one of those days where I'm just feeling nostalgic. And I want to listen to the good old days. Let's see here.
Well, that was all very interesting. Ask yourselves, what is wrong with spending eternity in hell? Well, I'm told it's rather hot there, for one. Dr. Craig is not offering an alternative view of morality. Okay, the whole point of Christianity, or so it is imagined, is to safeguard the eternal well-being of human souls. Now, happily, there's absolutely no evidence that the Christian hell exists. Okay, and I think we should look at the consequences of
course there's evidence that Christian hell exists. It says it in a book, a very old book.
Believing in this framework, this theistic framework, in this world, and what these moral underpinnings actually would be. All right. 9 million children die every year before they reach the age of 5.
Appeal to emotion.
Okay, picture an Asian tsunami of the sort we saw in 2004 that killed 250,000 people. One of those every 10 days, killing children only under 5. Okay, it's 24,000 children a day, 1,000 an hour, 17 or so a minute. That means before I can get to the end of this sentence, some few children, very likely, will have died in terror and agony.
Morally sufficient reasons.
Think of the parents of these children. Think of the fact that most of these men and women believe in God and are praying at this moment for their children to be spared.
They're going to heaven.
And their prayers will not be answered.
They're going to heaven. They're being relocated.
Okay, but according to Dr. Craig, this is all part of God's plan. Any God who would allow children by the millions to suffer and die in this way, and their parents to grieve in this way, either can do nothing to help them or doesn't care to. He is therefore either impotent or evil.
You don't understand the mind of God, Sam Harris. He has morally sufficient reasons.
And worse than that, on Dr. Craig's view, most of these people, many of these people certainly, will be going to hell because they're praying to the wrong God.
Nobody believes in hell anymore. Universalism, Sam Harris.
Okay, through no fault of their own, they were born into the wrong culture where they got the wrong theology and they missed the revelation.
Maybe they're annihilated.
Okay, there are 1.2 billion people in India at this moment. Most of them are Hindus, most of them therefore polytheists. Okay, in Dr. Craig's universe, no matter how good these people are, they are doomed. If you are praying to the monkey god Hanuman, you are doomed. Okay?
You deserve to be
You'll
doomed.
You'll be tortured in hell for eternity. Now, is there the slightest evidence for this? No. It just says so in Mark 9 and Matthew 13 and Revelation 14. Okay, perhaps you'll remember from the Lord of the Rings, it says when the elves die, they go to Valinor, but they can be reborn in Middle-earth. I say that just as a point of comparison. Okay, so God created the cultural isolation of the Hindus.
I love this, Sam Harris.
He engineered the circumstance of their deaths in ignorance of revelation. And then he created the penalty for this ignorance, which is an eternity of conscious torment in fire. Okay, on the other hand, on Dr. Craig's account, your run-of-the-mill serial killer in America, okay, who spent his life raping and torturing children, need only come to God, come to Jesus on death row, and after a final meal of fried chicken, he's going to spend an eternity in heaven after death.
Well, you got to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord, personal Savior, and truly repent.
This vision of life has absolutely nothing to do with moral accountability. And please notice the double standard that people like Dr. Craig use to exonerate God from all this evil. Okay, we're told that God is loving and kind and just and intrinsically good. But when someone like myself points out the rather obvious and compelling evidence that God is cruel and unjust because he visits suffering on innocent people of a scope and scale that would embarrass the most ambitious psychopath, okay, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, who can understand God's will? Okay, and yet this is precisely, this merely human understanding of God's will is precisely what believers use to establish his goodness in the first place. You know, something good.
I would say this little speech right here that Sam Harris did, I don't know how many years ago, at least 11, was it 12, 13 years ago? This started many people down the road to doubting Christianity.
What happens to a Christian? He feels some bliss while praying, say, or he sees some positive change in his life, and we're told that God is good. Okay, but when children by the tens of thousands are torn from their parents' arms and drowned, we're told that God is mysterious. Okay, this is how you play tennis without the net. Okay, and I want to suggest to you that it is not only tiresome when otherwise intelligent people speak this way, it is morally reprehensible.
Oof.
Okay, this kind of faith is really the perfection of narcissism. I mean, God loves me, don't you know?
Me.
He cured me of my eczema. He makes me feel so good while singing in church. And just when we had given up hope, he found a banker who was willing to reduce my mother's mortgage. Okay, given all that this God of yours does
Before you Christians start yelling, straw manning, I mean, Christians talk this way. They do
not accomplish in the lives
Some.
of others. Given the misery that's being imposed on some helpless child at this instant, this kind of faith is obscene. Okay, to think in this way is to fail to reason honestly or to care sufficiently about the suffering of other human beings. And if God is good and loving and just and kind, and he wanted to guide us morally with a book, why give us a book that supports slavery? Why give us a book that admonishes us to kill people for imaginary crimes like witchcraft? Now, of course, there's a way of not taking these questions to heart. Okay, according to Dr. Craig's divine command theory, God is not bound by moral duties. God doesn't have to be good. Whatever he commands is good. So when he commands that the Israelites to slaughter the Amalekites, that behavior becomes intrinsically good because he commanded.
It doesn't become. It is.
Okay, well, here we're being offered, I'm glad he raised the issue of psychopathy, we're being offered a psychopathic and psychotic moral attitude. It's psychotic because this is completely delusional. There's no reason to believe that we live in a universe ruled by an invisible monster, Yahweh. But it is psychopathic because this is a total detachment from the well-being of human beings. It is so easily rational.
You know what's interesting about all this is Sam Harris is usually very careful with his words, but there's times where he just lets people have it. He's not scared to offend people and make them cry.
Rationalizes the slaughter of children. Okay, just think about the Muslims at this moment who are blowing themselves up, okay, convinced that they are agents of God's will. There is absolutely nothing that Dr. Craig can say against their behavior in moral terms, apart from his own faith-based claim that they're praying to the wrong God. Okay,
if the God of the universe, the one and only creator God, did tell people to blow themselves up, you can't say that's wrong, Christians.
Right God, what they were doing would be good on divine command theory. Now, I'm obviously not saying that Dr. Craig or all religious people are psychopaths and psychotics, but this to me is the true horror of religion. Okay, it allows perfectly decent and sane people to believe by the billions what only lunatics could believe on their own. Okay, if you wake up tomorrow morning thinking that saying a few Latin words over your pancakes is going to turn them into the body of Elvis Presley, okay, you have lost your mind. Okay? But if you think more or less the same thing about a cracker and the body of Jesus, you're just a Catholic. And I'm not
so good.
the first person to notice that it's a very strange sort of loving God who would make salvation depend on believing in him on bad evidence. Okay, I mean, if you lived 2,000 years ago, there was evidence galore. I mean, he was just performing miracles, but apparently he got tired of being so helpful. Okay, and so now we all inherit this very heavy burden of the doctrines.
Sam Harris, you don't know the thousands, if not millions, of children God has saved. You don't know that.
And the effort to square it with what we now know about the cosmos and what we know about the all-too-human origins of Scripture becomes more and more difficult. And it's not just the generic God that Dr. Craig is recommending. It is God the Father and Jesus the Son. Okay, Christianity, on Dr. Craig's account, is the true moral wealth of the world.
Yeah, Mark Backman, you hit it. I was always told that people like Sam Harris had no understanding of the sophisticated religion of William Lane Craig. They are attacking a simplistic, childish belief that no serious believer holds. No, I think Sam Harris is steel-manning William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig believes in eternal conscious torment. William Lane Craig believes that whatever God says, wills, demands, decrees is good by definition. So if you're calling Sam Harris's portrayal of Christianity simplistic, you Christians, you're calling William Lane Craig simplistic. And actually, I bet you some Christians do call William Lane Craig simplistic.
Well, I hate to break it to you here at Notre Dame, but Christianity is a cult of human sacrifice. Christianity is not a religion that repudiates human sacrifice. It is a religion that celebrates a single human sacrifice as though it were effective. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. John 3:16.
In Christianity, someone's got to die.
Okay, the idea is that Jesus suffered the crucifixion so that none need suffer hell, except those billions in India and billions like them throughout history. Okay, this is a stride. This doctrine is astride a contemptible history of scientific ignorance and religious barbarism. We come from people who used to bury children under the foundations of new buildings as offerings to their imaginary gods. I mean, just think about that. In vast numbers of societies, people would bury children in post holes, people like ourselves thinking that this would prevent an invisible being from knocking down their buildings. Okay. These are the sorts of people who wrote the Bible.
He's right. Very superstitious people. This is, I remember him talking about hell and how appealing to the Christians in the audience, how they are not fearful of the Muslim hell. You don't lose any sleep, do you? Well, in the same way, you can't use hell as a Pascal wager type thing to non-Christians because they don't lose sleep over it. You got to find something else. Hell doesn't work. Okay. This is another oldie but a goodie. 8 years ago.
Need to stand up for liberal principles. This is what I said on last week's show. Obviously, I got a lot of hate for it, but all I'm saying is that liberal principles like freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear of violence, freedom to leave a religion, equality for women, equality for minorities, including homosexuals. These are liberal principles that liberals applaud for, but then when you say in the Muslim world this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
Yes. Yes. You notice this, people? And you know why this happens? Why some non-theists, some atheists give Muslims a pass? Well, it's because they got a darker skin shade. If that's not the definition of racism, I don't know what is. Because they're a minority. They're a protected class. It's horrible, that type of racism.
Yeah, well, liberals have really failed on the topic of theocracy. They'll criticize white theocracy. They'll criticize Christians. They'll still get agitated over the abortion clinic bombing that happened in 1984. But when you want to talk about the treatment of women and homosexuals and free thinkers and public intellectuals in the Muslim world, I would argue that liberals have failed us. And the crucial point of confusion, thank you.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crucial point of confusion is that we have been sold this meme of Islamophobia, where every criticism of the doctrine of Islam gets conflated with bigotry toward Muslims as people.
Right.
And that is, it's intellectually ridiculous. Even it gets
So hold on, are
conflated with
you
racism.
the person who understands the officially codified doctrine of Islam? You're the interpreter of that, so you can say, well, this is.
I'm actually well educated on this topic.
I'm asking you. So you're saying if I criticize you're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing. That if you're critical of something,
he didn't say that, Ben Affleck. Yeah, you can tell Ben Affleck is perturbed. He's getting emotional here. And when you get emotional, you tend to make mistakes. We all do it, but you tend to make mistakes. And he is so offended right now because I think it's a type of virtual signaling. He wants to protect the little guy. And the little guy in this case is those poor Muslims.
Well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
right.
Well, no,
It really isn't.
I'm not denying that certain people are bigoted against Muslims as people.
Right.
And that's a
That's
problem.
big of you.
But
why are you so hostile about this
Because it's
concept?
gross. It's racist.
It's not. But it's.
See, I would say he's being the racist here. If you're against mistreatment of women, you should be against the mistreatment of women no matter who does it. Whether a white guy or a brown guy. Whether a religion says go for it or not. I know liberals hate to hear this, but this is racism of low expectations. We can't expect this of these people. I mean, these cultures, they're poor cultures. They're trying their best. We can't have high standards on them.
It's like saying those stateless, shifty Jew.
You're not listening
Absolutely
to
not.
what we are saying.
You guys are saying if you want to be liberals, believe in liberal principles like
Right.
freedom of speech, like
Right.
we are endowed by our forefathers with an inalienable rights, like all men are created equal.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
Of course we do. No liberal doesn't want to criticize bad
But
ideas.
Islam
But
at
why
this moment
would-
is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
just
ideas
a
like
fact.
blasphemy.
It's not a fact.
It is
It's an ugly
Apostasy.
It is.
Okay. What is the core propositions of Islam? So the claim is made, Islam is the motherlode of bad ideas. What's the claims of Islam? That a guy initially went into a cave and heard from an angel that heard from God to tell him the very words of the creator of the universe? Bad idea? Good idea. That this guy over a course of 23 years got these visions from angels or whatever and wrote things down in a book. And the same guy married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage somewhere between 9 and 12 years old, I don't know. Had slaves until the day he died, but then freed him shortly before I've heard. That claims the moon split in two. Claims he rode into the heavens on a great beast. Bad ideas or good ideas? That if you don't repent, if you deny Allah as the one true God, even after hearing and knowing the truth, you should be killed on planet Earth and go to eternal torment, a really bad hell where your skin is burned off and then Allah gives you more skin so you can burn it off again. Is this not a motherlode of bad ideas? That women, when they go out, they should have a chaperone all the time. I mean, come on, Ben Affleck. Take a stand. Good ideas or bad ideas?
Liberal
Well, let me
principle
unpack
of
it.
tolerance.
Let me unpack it.
But
a
not
little bit.
for intolerance.
No, of course not. But the picture you're painting is, to some extent, true, but is hugely incomplete. It is certainly true that plenty
you're
of
missing the
fanatics and
nuance.
jihadis are Muslim. But the people who are standing up to them, Malala, incredible
Malala's
Muhammad Ali
fantastic, yes.
Dadak in Iran, in prison for 9 years for speaking up for Christians. A friend that I had in Pakistan who was shot this year, Rashid Rahman, for defending people accused of apostasy.
Nick,
Or how about the
But-
more than 1 billion
Those-
people
those
who
are
aren't
Muslims
fanatical, who don't punch
Well, I
women,
think
who just
that's-
want to go to the store,
wait a second.
eat sandwiches,
Wait a
pray
second.
5 times a day,
Right.
and don't
Yeah, Ben Affleck makes a good point. What about all those people who don't follow the text? Who don't quite believe everything the text says? What about those cultural Christians? They don't really believe that stuff. Well, that's the point. They really don't believe the stuff. They don't follow this stuff. Anyhow, I miss this old Sam Harris, but maybe the Sam Harris hasn't changed. So let's go to 1 day ago, and this is long, but I'm not going to play all of it. Let's go to what he has to say about Donald Trump.
One of the failure modes of empathy is our susceptibility to anecdotal data. Just a good story will get us to not think clearly. But what about empathy in the context of just discussing ideas with other people? And then there's a large number of people, like in this country, red and blue, half the population believes certain things on immigration or on the response to the pandemic or any kind of controversial issue, even if the election was fairly executed. Having an empathy for their worldview, trying to understand where they're coming from, not just in the explicit statement of their idea, but the entirety of like the roots from which their idea stems. That kind of empathy while you're discussing ideas, what is in your pursuit of truth, having empathy for the perspective of a large number of other people versus raw mathematical reason.
I think it's important, but it only takes you so far, right? It doesn't get you to truth, right? It's not truth is not it's not decided by democratic principles, and certain people believe things for understandable reasons, but those reasons are nonetheless bad reasons, right? They don't scale, they don't generalize, they're not reasons anyone should adopt for themselves or respect, epistemologically, and yet their circumstance is understandable and it's something you can care about, right? And so just take. I think there's many examples of this you might be thinking of, but I mean one that comes to mind is I've been super critical of Trump, obviously, and I've been super critical of certain people for endorsing him or not criticizing him when he really made it, patently obvious who he was. If there had been any doubt initially, there was no doubt when we have a sitting president who's not agreeing to a peaceful transfer of power, right? So I'm critical of all of that, and yet the fact that many millions of Americans didn't see what was wrong with Trump or bought into the
See, this sounds a bit elitist, right? Many millions of Americans didn't see what I saw. If only they had my wisdom.
Didn't see through his con, right? I mean, they bought into the idea that he was a brilliant businessman who might just be able to change things because he's so unconventional and so, his heart is in the right place. He's really a man of the people, even though he's gold-plated everything in his life. They bought the myth somehow of, largely because they had seen him on television for almost a decade and a half, pretending to be this genius businessman who could get things done. It's understandable to me that many very frustrated people who have not had their hopes and dreams actualized, who have been the victims of globalism and many other current trends, it's understandable that they would be confused and not see the liability of electing a grossly incompetent, morbidly.
Okay, this I find very interesting. What exactly was the liability of voting in a grossly incompetent person? Really think about that. So let's give Sam Harris everything he wants. I agree with a lot of what he's saying. I don't know about the business incompetency part. I'm sure he's competent somewhat in business. You got to give him that. But let's assume he's totally incompetent. Let's assume Trump is a douche, stupid, ignorant, low IQ, narcissistic. Let's give him all that. What was the bad things what was the liability to the United States? You guys remember? The stock market soaring. Most of you got a tax cut, like 1 or 2%. Unemployment was at record lows. Less wars, less people killed in wars. What was the big bad thing that happened? COVID came around, right? But that kind of messed things up in the United States. But you could say that for other countries as well. You could say he didn't handle COVID right, but a lot of other world leaders didn't handle COVID correctly as well. So what's this huge problem? See, this is amazing to me because people, I think, overestimate the power of the presidency. Here's an example where you can have a complete dunce as president and the country still chugs along. Not only chugs along, but does really well. It seems like the only liability I can think of is he hurt people's feelings. Trump did. And then at the end, I agree. Like, he should have conceded, walked off gracefully. But, you know, he's a dunce. He's a narcissistic goofball, right? You can't expect that. But still, he left. We got a new president.
Narcissistic person into the presidency. Which is to say that I don't blame. There are many millions of people who I don't necessarily blame for the Trump phenomenon, but I can nonetheless bemoan the phenomenon as indicative of very bad state of affairs in our society. Right. So there's two levels to it. I mean, one is I think you have to call a spade when you're talking about how things actually work and what things are likely to happen or not. But then you can recognize that people have very different life experiences and yeah, I mean, I think empathy and probably the better word for what I would hope to embody there is compassion, right? Like really, to really wish people well, and to really wish strangers well, effortlessly wish them well, and to realize that there is no.
Yeah, feel free to write your comments in and tag me if you think it's important now, or you're asking me a question. And so I'm watching this for the first time. We can watch it together if you haven't watched it. Country chugs along for you, but not women with ectopic pregnancies in red states. Okay, but remember, Trump is just a dunce, got nothing done. So you got to be careful how you phrase this. If he's incompetent, then you would have to say he's incompetent even to fulfilling what he wants to do. And one could make the argument, Trump or no Trump, that still would have happened, right? A Republican coming in years prior put a Supreme Court justice, right-winger Supreme Court guy in. It was inevitable, right? So you can't say at the same time that Trump is totally incompetent, a dunce, and say he did things that hurt you. Because that means he actually did things. And maybe his goal was to hurt you. Well, he was successful. See, that's the problem with calling someone incompetent. You got to say, well, he was competent in hurting me. He did a good job. He hurt me.
At bottom, there's no real opposition between selfishness and selflessness, because wise selfishness really takes into account other people's happiness. I mean, which do you want to live in a society where you have everything, but most other people have nothing? Or do you want to live in a society where you're surrounded by happy, creative, self-actualized people who are having their hopes and dreams realized? I think it's obvious that the second society is much better, however much you can guard your good luck.
But what about having empathy for certain principles that people believe? For example, the pushback, the other perspective on this, because you said bought the myth of Trump as a great businessman. There could be a lot of people that are supporters of Trump who could say that Sam Harris bought the myth that we have this government of the people, by the people, that actually represents the people, as opposed to a bunch of elites who are running a giant bureaucracy that is corrupt, that is feeding themselves, and they're actually not representing the people. And then here's this chaos agent, Trump, who speaks off the top of his head. Yeah, he's flawed in all this number of ways. He's a more comedian than he is a presidential type of figure. And he's actually creating the kind of chaos that's going to shake up this bureaucracy, shake up the elites that are so uncomfortable because they don't want the world to know about the game that got running on everybody else. So that's that's the kind of perspective that they would take and say, yeah, there's these flaws that Trump has, but this is necessary.
I agree with the first part. So I haven't bought the myth that it's a truly representative democracy in the way that you might idealize. And on some level, I mean, this is a different conversation, but on some level, I'm not even sure how much I think it should be, right? Like, I'm not sure we want, in the end, everyone's opinion given equal weight about, just what we should do about anything. And I include myself in that. I mean, there are many topics around which I don't deserve to have a strong opinion because I don't know what I'm talking about, right? Or what I would be talking about if I had a strong opinion. So, and I think we'll probably get to that, to some of those topics, because I've declined to have certain conversations on my podcast just because I think I'm the wrong person to have that conversation, right? And it's and I think it's important to see those bright lines in one's life and in the moment politically and ethically. So yeah, I think so. Leave aside the viability of democracy. I'm under no illusions that all of our institutions are worth preserving precisely as they have been up until the moment this great orange wrecking ball came swinging through our lives. But it was a very bad bet to elect someone who is grossly incompetent. And
so there it is, grossly incompetent. Okay, but what's the bad things that happened because of his incompetency? What's the worst that happened? I've asked people, how has Trump hurt you? Most people cannot answer that question. They can talk about how he's hurt other people, but not themselves. And prior to COVID, I mean, I'd say most people's lives in the United States were better than 3 years ago, 3 years prior to COVID. You guys remember? The economy was soaring, stock market was soaring, your 401ks were higher, your taxes were lower. How exactly was your life worse?
Worse than incompetent, genuinely malevolent in his selfishness, right? And this is something we know based on literally decades of him being in the public eye, right? He's not a public servant in any normal sense of that term, and he couldn't possibly give an honest or sane answer to the question you asked me about empathy and reason and like how should we, what should guide us. I genuinely think he is missing some necessary moral and psychological tools, right? And this is, I can feel compassion for him as a human being because I think having those things is incredibly important, and genuinely loving other people is incredibly important, and knowing what all that's about is that's really the good stuff in life. And I think he's missing a lot of that. But I think we don't want to promote people to the highest positions of power in our society who are far outliers in pathological terms, right? We want them to be far outliers if in the best case, in wisdom and compassion and some of the topics you've brought up. I mean, we want someone to be deeply informed. We want someone to be,
we shouldn't elect people unless they're deeply informed to the highest powers. Okay, listen to this. Who's electing presidents of the United States? The people, right? Why is he blaming? Well, actually, you know what? He's not blaming Trump here. He's blaming the people. It's not Trump's fault that he got elected. Well, he ran, but it's the people's fault. What Sam Harris is really saying here, I think, is he's not bashing the incompetency of Trump. He's bashing the incompetency of the American people who elected him. That sounds a little elitist, right? Maybe Sam Harris would want to fix this problem by saying you should have to pass a certain test before you can vote. I mean, we're talking about the highest official in the United States, in charge of the military, commander-in-chief. Not just anyone should be able to vote. I think this is what Sam Harris is saying. It's the people's fault. So all this stuff, get out the vote, everybody vote, just go out and vote. No, that's wrong. We should discourage voting unless you are well educated in all the pertinent facts of that candidate. I think that's what Sam Harris is really saying, right?
Unusually curious, unusually alert to how they may be wrong or getting things wrong consequentially. He's none of those things. And insofar as we're going to get normal mediocrities in that role, which I think is often the best we could expect, let's get normal mediocrities in that role, not once in a generation narcissists and frauds. I mean, it's like just take honesty as a single variable, right? I think you want, yes, it's possible that most politicians lie at least some of the time. I don't think that's a good thing. I think people should be generally honest, even to a fault. Yes, there are certain circumstances where lying, I think, is necessary.
Blastasticful. I tend to agree with what I just said. So if Sam Harris is indeed saying that, I would agree with him. I think it's really dangerous for people to vote who have no clue what they're voting for, who they're voting for, and have no skin in the game. In any other circumstance in life, I think people would agree with me when it comes to memberships of any local club, a sewing club at your local YMCA or whatever. You got a sewing club, and you want to make decisions on how much material to buy, who's going to lead the sewing club, whatever. Well, should a non-member, someone who hasn't paid their dues, have a say on that? No. The member should have a say on that. People who have paid their dues. Can you imagine if there was a law that said you had to pay at least $1 in federal income tax, more than what you received in benefits, in order to vote? That would cut out probably 20% of the voting population. At least 20%. You actually have to pay federal income tax in order to vote. Or you actually have to pay property taxes in order to vote. You have to have some skin in the game. You have to be a member, not through birth, but through dues. Oh, that's controversial, right?
Kind of on a continuum of self-defense and violence. So it's like if you're going to, if the Nazis come to your door and ask you if you've got Anne Frank in the attic, I think it's okay to lie to them. But Trump, arguably there's never been a person that anyone could name in human history who's lied with that kind of velocity. I mean, it was just a blizzard of lies, great and small, to pointless and effective. But
I think there's another contradiction what Sam Harris is saying here. If someone is a complete dunce, incompetent, low IQ, these are the things Sam Harris has either directly said or is intimating here. To say he's directly lying on certain things means he knows better. How can you know better if you're dunce and you don't know anything? You can just say he's wrong, mistaken, whatever. But you can't say he's in purposely with intent, knowing what is true and saying the opposite. That takes knowledge. That takes some type of education to lie. You have to be educated in what you're lying about. You have to know the truth first before you can lie about it. Right?
It says something fairly alarming about our society that a person of that character got promoted. And so, yes, I have compassion and concern for half of the society who didn't see it that way, and that's going to sound elitist and smug or something for anyone who's on that side listening to me. But it's genuine. I mean, I understand that like I barely have I'm like one of the luckiest people in the world, and I barely have the bandwidth to pay attention to half the things I should pay attention to in order to have an opinion about half the things we're going to talk about, right? So how much less bandwidth is somebody who's working 2 jobs, or a single mom who's raising multiple kids, even a single kid? It's unimaginable to me that people have the bandwidth to really track this stuff. And so then they jump on social media and they get inundated by misinformation, and they see.
Yes, the misinformation. Whew. Who is the arbiter of what is misinformation and what is real information? Who adjudicates that? And those who do adjudicate that, what's their track record of being correct? And I think my guess is they're going to talk about this, because I saw they talk about Twitter. But yeah, I mean, I just look back the recent history, a few years, and the grief, the ridicule, the shame that people got for saying things like, Ivermectin might be able to help you against COVID. Oh, that's horse medicine, blah, 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 blah. Misinformation. The vaccine can cause adverse events, can actually even kill you. Misinformation. No, don't talk about that. And later on, the virus came from Wuhan laboratories in China. Misinformation, conspiracy theory. Couldn't it be true? Couldn't it be true that COVID could help that ivermectin could help some people? Could it be true that there's a ton of adverse events? Maybe you can still believe that the benefits outweigh the risk, but at least say it. There's a ton of risks. I tell you, this is why I'm for free speech and why you have to risk it. You have to risk misinformation. You have to put it into the ether and let people debate it and argue it. You have to allow people to say things that make other people cry, because it could be the truth.
Favorite influencer just said, and now they're worried about vaccines, and we're living in an environment where the information space has become so corrupted, and we've built machines to further corrupt it. We've built a business model for the internet that further corrupts it. So it's chaos in informational terms, and I don't fault people for being confused and impatient and at their wits' end. And yes, Trump was an enormous fuck you to the establishment, and that was understandable.
Yeah, that's probably why he got voted in.
For many reasons.
To me, Sam Harris, the great Sam Harris, is somebody I've looked up to for a long time as a beacon, a voice of reason. And there's this meme on the internet, and I would love you to steel man the case for it and against, that Trump broke Sam Harris's brain. That there's something is disproportionately to the actual impact that Trump had on our society. He had an impact on the ability of balanced, calm, rational minds to see the world clearly, to think clearly. You being one of the beacons of that. Is there a degree to which he broke your brain? Otherwise known as Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Medical.
Yeah, I actually lean towards that. That's at least partially true. Like, what Trump did to Sam Harris is what Sam Harris did to Ben Affleck. Sam Harris said a few words, put it out into the airwaves, and caused a grown man to have a meltdown on air. And I think Trump did the same thing to Sam Harris. Maybe not at the same degree, because Harris is a little more composed than Ben Affleck.
Yeah, I think Trump derangement syndrome is a very clever meme, because it just throws the problem back on the person who's criticizing Trump. But in truth, the true Trump derangement syndrome was not to have seen how dangerous and divisive it would be to promote someone like Trump to that position of power.
Again, tell me the danger. We got hindsight now, right? We can look back and throughout history. Tell me this huge danger. What is this huge liability that Trump brought? Point to it for me, please.
And in the final moment, not to see how untenable it was to still support someone who, a sitting president who was not committing to a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, that was if that wasn't a bright line for you, you have been deranged by something, because that was
yeah. So that's what he's pointing to. This is the terrible thing that Trump did. At the end of his presidency, he didn't concede the election. In hindsight, I'm looking back at it and I'm saying he still left the office. Biden still moved in. Sure, we had that January 6th incident where one person died, and then 4 or 5 other people died the day through suicide and a stroke the days afterwards. But, riots in the United States is par for the course. We've got a lot of riots in the United States the past in its history. But I agree with Sam Harris. But what do you expect from a narcissist? You're not going to expect him to admit defeat, right? But in hindsight, what's this big deal? This is why a lot of people want January 6th to be bad. I mean, bad with a capital B, because then they can say, see, now Trump is bad. And that's why we can't reelect him. This is part of the Trump derangement syndrome. He is so dangerous. I mean, if he's elected again, I mean, he'll never leave. I'll take bets on that one. I hope Trump becomes president again so I can make this bet. I bet you if Trump gets reelected, 4 years will go by and he will leave, and that'll be that, and then we'll have another president.
You know, that was 1 minute to midnight for our democracy, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it really was, but for the integrity of a few people, that we didn't suffer some real constitutional crisis and real emergency, you know, after January 6th. I mean, if Mike Pence had caved in and decided to not certify the election, right? If it literally, yes, you can count on two hands the number of people who held things.
Actually, this is a great point Sam Harris is making. What if that would have happened? I'll propose to you that we would still have Biden as president today.
Together at that moment. And so it wasn't for want of trying on Trump's part that we didn't succumb to some, you know, real, truly uncharted catastrophe with our democracy. So the fact that didn't happen is not a sign that those of us who were worried that it was so close to happening were exaggerating the problem. I mean, it's like, you know, you almost got run over by a car, but you didn't. And so, you know, the fact that you're adrenalized and you're thinking.
Yeah, well, I've talked to my friends about this at length, and it's up in the air what would have happened if Mike Pence would have caved to Trump. But there's so many other people that would have to cave to Trump. My guess is what would happen, Biden's certification would just been delayed. The votes are still there. They just need to be certified, right? And it's one of those things that I don't think anybody could predict exactly how it would unfold. But my guess is, at worst, it would just been delayed.
You know, but boy, that was dangerous. I probably shouldn't, you know, wander in the middle of the street with my eyes closed. You weren't wrong to feel that you really had a problem, right? And came very close to something truly terrible. So I think that's where we were, and I think we shouldn't do that again, right? So the fact that he's coming back around as potentially a viable candidate, you know, I'm not spending much time thinking about it, frankly, because it's, you know, I'm waiting for the moment where it requires some thought. I mean, it took up. I don't know how many podcasts I devoted to the topic. It wasn't that many in the end, you know, against the number of podcasts I devoted to other topics. But there are people who look at Trump and just find him funny, entertaining, not especially threatening.
Yeah.
He's like it's just good fun to see somebody who's just not taking anything seriously, and it's just putting a stick in the wheel of business as usual again and again and again and again. And they don't really see anything much at stake, right? It doesn't really matter if we don't support NATO. It doesn't really matter if he says he trusts Putin more than our intelligence services. I mean, none of this it doesn't matter if he's on the one hand saying that he loves the leader of North Korea, and on the other threatens to bomb them back to the Stone Age, right, on Twitter. It all can be taken in the spirit of kind of reality television. It's like, this is just
yeah. So he threw out a few things there. My daughter asked me yesterday, do I think Russia would have invaded Ukraine if Trump was still president? And I told her, I don't know, but probably not. Do you think the world from, how do I put this, our enemies, the axis of evil, as George W. Bush put it, would try things with Trump as president? I would say because Trump is viewed as a loose cannon, as a narcissistic type of guy, countries are more fearful than if you have a reasonable guy in. So in some bizarre, crazy way, Trump was a pretty good deterrent. I wonder what Sam Harris would say to that.
This is the part of the movie that's just fun to watch, right? And I understand that. I can even inhabit that space for a few minutes at a time, but there's a deeper concern that we're in the process of entertaining ourselves to death, right? That we're just not taking things seriously. And this is a problem I've had with several other people we might name who just appear to me to be goofing around at scale. And they lack a kind of moral seriousness. I mean, they're touching big problems where lives hang in the balance, but they're just fucking around. And I think they're really important problems.
Yeah, this is the big difference between guys like Sam Harris and me and a lot of others is I play poker, and it's like if you play poker and you have a really strong hand, but there's one or two hands out there that can beat you, and you're constantly worried about it. It's called worried about the monsters in the closet. And so you're constantly folding and you're losing pots, you're losing money because you're always scared of that one major what if. I think this is what Sam Harris is doing. He would be a scared poker player. They'd say, well, there's a chance I'm beat here, so I'm not gonna call. Sure, what Sam Harris is saying could have happened. But I have a little more faith in the U.S. Constitution than Sam Harris does, I think. I have a little more faith in the checks and balances. I have a little more faith in even those Republican governors who said, no, Trump, we're not going to find 16,000 votes for you or whatever it was.
We have to get our head straight around. And we need, it's not to say that institutions don't become corrupt. I think they do. And I'm quite worried that, both about the loss of trust in our institutions and the fact that trust has eroded for good reason, right? That they have become less trustworthy. They've become infected by, political ideologies that are not truth tracking. I mean, I worry about all of that. But I just think we need institutions. We need to rebuild them. We need experts who are real experts. We need to value expertise over, amateurish speculation and conspiracy thinking and just, and bullshit.
What kind of amateur speculation we're doing on this very podcast?
I'm usually alert to the moments where I'm...
Oh, Lex Fridman. That's why Lex Fridman has 2.75 million subscribers. Comments like that. Excellent.
Just guessing, or where I actually feel like I'm talking from within my wheelhouse. And I try to telegraph that a fair amount with people. So yeah, I mean, but it's different. Like, I mean, you can invite someone onto your podcast who's an expert about something that you're not an expert about. And then you in the process of getting more informed yourself, your audience is getting more informed. So you're asking smart questions, and you might be pushing back at the margins, but you know that when push comes to shove on that topic, you really don't have a basis to have a strong opinion. And if you were going to form a strong opinion that was this counter to the expert you have in front of you, it's going to be by deference to some other expert who you've brought in or who you've heard about or whose work you've read or whatever. But there's a paradox to how we value authority in science that most people don't understand. And I think we should at some point unravel.
Yeah, our whole judicial system is based on this, though. It's based on, you listen to the experts, and then guess who gets to decide which expert to listen to? The people who don't know anything, right? Called the jury members. They have to decide which expert is more credible, more believable. At some point, you just got to make a decision. On almost every issue, you have experts who disagree, maybe not on the main stuff, but on the fringes. It seems like Sam Harris is bashing the whole American system right now. Like if you are a liberal listening right now and you blame Trump for a lot of the problems in the United States, I think you need a reality check. You shouldn't blame Trump. You should blame the people who voted for him. Right? Trump is just a symptom of a larger problem, right? In fact, one could call Trump a victim. I mean, he probably has some psychological mental problems, right? I bet you anything Sam Harris believes that. In fact, he even said that. He's incapable of empathy, of reason. He at least implied that earlier on. But it's the people's fault. They're the ones who voted him in. So then the real question is, how do we have a smarter electorate? How do we encourage people to desire, to want to learn more about their country and the political system and various issues when they're working 2 jobs to make ends meet? It's a vicious cycle, right?
All that, because it's the basis for a lot of public confusion, and frankly, it's the basis for a lot of criticism I've received on these topics, where it's, people think that I'm I'm against free speech, or I'm an establishment shill, or it's like I just think I'm a credentialist. I just think people with PhDs from Ivy League universities should run everything. It's not true, but there's a ton of there's a lot to cut through to get to daylight there, because people are very confused about how we value authority in the service of rationality generally.
You've talked about it, but it's just interesting, the intensity of feeling you have. You've had this famous phrase about Hunter Biden and children in the basement. Can you just revisit this case? So let me give another perspective on the situation of January 6th and Trump in general. It's possible that January 6th and things of that nature revealed that our democracy is actually pretty fragile, and that Trump is not a malevolent and ultra competent malevolent figure, but is simply a jokester. And he just, by creating the chaos, revealed that it's all pretty fragile. Because you're a student in history, and there's a lot of people like Vladimir Lenin, Hitler, who are exceptionally competent at controlling power, at being executives and taking that power, controlling the generals, controlling all the
It's interesting that Lex Fridman calls figures like Hitler as extremely competent.
figures involved, and certainly not tweeting, but working in the shadows behind the scenes to gain power. And they did so extremely competently, and that is how they were able to gain power. The pushback with Trump, he was doing none of that. He was creating what he's very good at, creating drama, sometimes for humor's sake, sometimes for drama's sake, and simply revealed that our democracy is fragile. And so he's not this once-in-a-generation horrible figure.
See, I would question Lex Fridman, what makes you think our democracy is fragile? Because a guy with horns was led into the chambers by policemen?
Once-in-a-generation narcissist. No, I don't think he's a truly scary, sinister, Putin-like, or Hitler, much less Hitler-like figure. Not at all. I mean, he's not ideological. He doesn't care about anything beyond himself. So it's not. No, he's.
So he's not a fascist. I mean, he doesn't care to be one. He doesn't have the ability to be one. Because he's not like Hitler. Hitler was competent. Trump is incompetent. I say this to allay the fears of those liberals out there that think if Trump is reelected, I mean, we could have a new Hitler in the United States.
Much less scary than any really scary, totalitarian, right? I mean, and he's
more Brave New World in 1984.
This is what Eric Weinstein never stops badgering me about, but he's still wrong, Eric. I can my analogy for Trump was that he's an evil Chauncey Gardner. I don't know if you remember the book or the film Being There with Peter Sellers. But Peter Sellers is this gardener who really doesn't know anything, but he gets recognized as this wise man and he gets promoted to immense power in Washington because he's speaking in these kind of in a semblance of wisdom. He's got these very simple aphorisms, or what seem to be aphorisms. He's just talking. All he cares about is gardening. He's just talking about his garden all the time. Yeah. But he'll say something. But in the spring, the new shoots will bloom. And people read into that some kind of genius, insight politically, and so he gets promoted. And so that's the joke of the film. For me, Trump has always been someone like an evil Chauncey Gardner. I mean, he's. It's not to say he's totally. Yes, he has a certain kind of genius. He's got a genius for creating a spectacle around himself. Right? He's got a genius for getting the eye of the media always coming back to him. But it's a kind of
true. Trump is a great marketer.
It's a kind of self-promotion that only works if you actually are truly shameless and don't care about having a reputation for anything that I or you would want to have a reputation for, right? It's like the pure pornography of attention, right? And he just wants more of it. I think the truly depressing and genuinely scary thing was that we have a country that, at least half of the country, given how broken our society is in many ways, we have a country that didn't see anything wrong with that. Bringing someone who obviously doesn't know what he should know to be president, and who's obviously not a good person, right? Who obviously doesn't care about people, can't even pretend to care about people really, right? In a credible way.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is, how do I say this? I want to speak the truth here. The truth is, most people don't care about other people. I mean, on a practical, everyday level, almost every person listening here would kill another person in lieu of their own family member or loved one. We have evolved this way. We value the people in our closest inner circle, our family, way before people around. There are people being murdered, raped, killed right now as I'm speaking, and no one here in the live stream chat is crying. Right? Is there anybody in the live stream chat tearing up right now? How can you live with yourself knowing that right now someone's being raped, right now someone's being murdered, right now someone's being killed in war, right now? Why aren't you crying? So this whole idea of Trump doesn't care about people. Most people don't care about people. And that's a little harsh. I think that when we sit and talk reasonably with each other and we imagine, like I'm sure if we all just really imagined a rape or a murder going on right now, and if we could somehow put our children's face on the victim's face, then maybe we could muster up a tear, right?
And so, I mean, if there's a silver lining to this, it's along the lines you just sketched. It shows us how vulnerable our system is to a truly brilliant and sinister figure, right? I mean, like I think we really dodged a bullet. Yes, someone far more competent and conniving and ideological could have exploited our system in a way that Trump didn't.
Yeah, and another part of the problem here, I think, is it's the whole tough love versus soft love type thing. Sometimes when people are perceived, Trump doesn't care about certain people. Trump doesn't care about this person. Maybe he does, but his solution to that person's problem is one of tough love that they don't like. That's another thing that might be going on. And you can disagree with it. Like, for example, what's a demographic that people accuse Trump of not caring about? Let's say African Americans. I think a lot of people call Trump a racist, right? Well, maybe Trump, and I don't know if Trump has ever said this, but let's say Trump was against affirmative action because he thinks that will hurt African Americans more than it helps. Someone could say, bad Trump. He hates African Americans. He wants to get rid of affirmative action. He's a bad, evil guy. Maybe he's actually wants to help African Americans. And that's one way he believes you can do it, to get rid of affirmative action. Here's another one. Lower taxation for everyone, but especially the wealthy. Oh, he's hurting African Americans. He's hurting minorities. He's hurting the poor by doing that. Well, but maybe Trump believes that by doing that, it will, rightly or wrongly, it will encourage economic growth and lower unemployment rate. And by the way, the unemployment rate was never lower in American history, except for Trump. Trump had the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans in all of American history. Did you guys know that? I'm quite sure that's true. I could be wrong, but someone can fact check me on that. So one could say he doesn't care about African Americans, but yet it seems like his policies ended up helping African Americans.
And that's yeah. So if we plug those holes eventually, that would be a good thing, and he would have done a good thing for our society, right? I mean, one of the things we realized, and I think nobody knew. I mean, I certainly didn't know it, and I didn't hear anyone talk about it, is how much our system relies on norms rather than laws.
Yeah, civility,
right?
almost.
Yeah, it's just like it's quite possible that he never did anything illegal. You know, truly illegal. I mean, I think he probably did a few illegal things, but like illegal such that he really should be thrown in jail for it. You know, at least that remains to be seen. So all of the chaos, all of the all of the diminishment of our stature in the world, all of the opportunity costs of spending years focused on nonsense, all of that was just norm violations. All that was just all a matter of not saying the thing you should say. But that doesn't mean they're insignificant, right? It's not that it's not illegal for a sitting president to say, no, I'm not going to commit to a peaceful transfer of power, right? We'll wait and see whether I win. If I win, it was the election was valid. If I lose, it was fraudulent, right?
But aren't those humorous perturbations to our system of civility such that we know what the limits are, and now we start to think that and have these kinds of discussions?
But that wasn't a humorous perturbation because he did everything he could. Granted, he wasn't very competent, but he did everything he could to try to steal the election. I mean, the irony is he claimed to have an election stolen from him, all the while doing everything he could to steal it, declaring it fraudulent in advance, trying to get the votes to not be counted as the evening wore on, knowing that they were going to be disproportionately Democrat votes because of the position he took on mail-in ballots. I mean, all of it was fairly calculated. The whole circus of the clown car that crashed into Four Seasons Landscaping, right? And you got Rudy Giuliani with his hair dye, and you got Sidney Powell, and all these grossly incompetent people lying as freely as they could breathe about election fraud, right? And all these things are getting thrown out by largely Republican election officials and Republican judges.
I still get perturbed when I hear people throw out the accusation of other people lying so easily. Like you almost have to be omniscient, or you need a ton of evidence of motivation. And like if someone, like let's say I'm God and I'm omniscient, and I told you as God, as an omniscient being, that if you took all the fraud out of the last election, Trump actually would have won. Okay? This is a thought experiment. Don't get you in a waddle. This is a thought experiment. So I'm omniscient and I'm telling you, I know the truth. If you pull all the fraud out, Trump actually would have won. That's the truth. Okay? In this thought experiment. And then a Democrat says, there's no election fraud, and even if there was, it wouldn't have changed the election. Has that Democrat just lied? Have they lied? No, they're mistaken. They couldn't possibly know all the facts that I know as an omniscient being. And this is what I think Sam Harris is doing when he's saying that he could be right in some cases, but it bothers me how easily people just say, oh, Clinton lied about this, Biden lied about that, Trump lied about this. Mislead, I can believe, easier, but that's different than lying. Being flat out wrong, I can believe, but that's different than lying. And I don't know what my problem is. Like, why is it? Maybe I am a virtue ethicist type guy, after all, not a consequentialist, because it does bother me when people can just throw out, you're a liar, you're a racist, you're all these really, traditionally, really horrible things. And I don't think you can use the evidence to say that. In some cases, sure you can. But I would say in the most cases, it's just people are wrong, mistaken, misleading.
It wasn't for want of trying that he didn't maintain his power in this country. He really tried to steal the presidency.
Did someone fact check me yet? Trump is right that African American unemployment hit a record low in December. The unemployment rate for Black Americans is currently 6.8%, the lowest since January 1972. Yeah, I think it's correct. So what do you liberals do with that? Like, do you just say, well, it's not because of Trump, it's just he got lucky? If it were true that the employment was the highest for African Americans, was the highest under Trump, what do you do with that? You just say, oh, that has nothing to do with Trump. If you say that, then you have to be careful with things you attribute to the presidents you like. Well, under Biden, X and X has happened. Well, that's not his. You can't give him the credit. He just, he got lucky.
He just was not competent, and the people around him weren't competent. So that's a good thing, and it's worth not letting that happen again.
But he wasn't competent, so he didn't do everything he could.
Well, no, he did everything he could. He didn't do everything that could have been done by someone more competent.
Right, but the tools you have as a president, you could do a lot of things. You can declare emergencies, especially during COVID. You could postpone the election. Right. You can create military conflict. That any kind of reason to postpone the election. There's a lot of stuff.
But he tried to do things, and he would have to have done those things through other people. And there are people who refused to do those things. There are people who said they would quit. They would quit publicly, right? I mean, you start again. There are multiple books written about the last hours of this presidency, and the details are shocking in what he tried to do and tried to get others to do, and it's awful, right? I mean, it's just awful that we were that close to something. To a true unraveling of our political process. I mean, it's the only time in our lifetime that anything like this has happened. And it was deeply embarrassing, right? On the world stage. It's just like we looked like a banana republic there for a while. And
I don't know if Sam Harris understands this, but for a lot of conservatives, I won't speak for a lot, for all of them, but for a lot of conservatives, what the world thinks of the United States is not that important. But I think for people who lean left, it is important. And I think this is one of the major fundamental differences between conservatives and liberals is liberals want to be loved more than conservatives. Do you guys disagree with that? I honestly think that's true. I think liberals want to be loved more than conservatives.
The lone superpower. It's not good, right? And so we shouldn't. The people who thought, well, we just need to shake things up, and this is a great way to shake things up, and having people, storm our Capitol and smear shit on the walls. That's just more shaking things up, right? It's all just for the lulz. There's a nihilism and cynicism to all of that, which, again, in certain people, it's understandable. Frankly, it's not understandable if you've got $1 billion and you have a compound in Menlo Park or wherever. It's like there are people who are cheerleading this stuff who shouldn't be cheerleading this stuff, and who know that they can get on their Gulfstream and fly to their compound in New Zealand if everything goes to shit, right? So there's a cynicism to all of that I think we should be deeply critical of.
What I'm trying to understand is not, and analyze, is not the behavior of this particular human being, but the effect it had, in part, on the division between people. And to me, the meme of Sam Harris's brain being broken by Trump represents. You're like the person I would look to bridge the division.
Well, I don't think there is something profitably to be said to someone who's truly captivated by the personality cult of Trumpism, right? Like, there's nothing that I'm going to say there's no conversation I'm going to have with Candace Owens, say, about Trump that's going to converge on something reasonable, right?
Whoa. He's basically saying certain people are hopeless. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I can understand why he said that. I truly can, because I've been there. I've talked to theists for the last decade, and in my mind, I'm going, there's nothing I can say to change this person's mind, so I'm not even going to try. I do get that sentiment. However, you turn the cameras off, you have a one-on-one conversation while you're fishing or playing poker, where you're laughing together. I bet you that Sam Harris and Candace Owens could come together on at least some issues that they currently disagree on, and at least understand each other and say, hey, I totally get where you're coming from, why you're saying this. I understand your justification and your reasoning. I see the world a little bit differently. No harm done. And maybe they could change each other's minds as well over time. But again, cameras have to be off. Followers are not listening. They have to be truly enjoying each other's company, doing something peripheral to what they're talking about. By the way, I should write a book. I think these are the keys to actually changing someone's mind. You don't come on to a live stream. You're not on TV. You're doing something else, and then as a peripheral thing, you're talking about something, and then yeah, I can see that. Another way to do it is get drunk first, right? Get totally drunk, and then, like if Sam Harris was really drunk and if Candace Owens was really drunk, they probably could have a good conversation.
Think so?
No, I mean, I haven't tried with Candace, but I've tried with many people who are in that particular orbit. I mean, I've had conversations with people who won't admit that there's anything wrong with Trump. Anything.
So I'd like to push for the empathy versus reason. Because when you operate in the space of reason, yes. But I think there's a lot of power in you, Sam Harris, showing that you're willing to see the good qualities of Trump, publicly showing that. I think that's the way to win over.
But he has so few of them. He has fewer good qualities than virtually anyone.
See, Lex Fridman is brilliant. He's trying to say, look, if you want to change people's minds, you have to give a little. And Sam Harris, well, there's so little to give. How do you think I'm so effective with theists? I give them as much as I can. Even as a conservative, I will be the first one to say that Trump is a schmuck, a narcissist. I would never want my son to grow up and be anything like him. Okay? Now the liberals hear me say that and they go, good for Doug. Maybe, just maybe I'll listen to like 1% of what he says now. Because Doug just admitted that Trump is a narcissistic goofball. Maybe I'll listen to maybe 2% of what Doug says now. That's how you change people's minds. And by the way, you Democrats, you liberals, you should do the same thing to me. You should say, I don't know, on some certain topic that typically is a liberal topic. Say, yeah, Doug, I totally agree. I can see how, I don't know, affirmative action can be bad and maybe we should get rid of it at some point or maybe even now. And I understand that feel sorry for ism is prevalent and it can actually do more harm to minorities. I totally get that point. And here's a specific example. I think we should stop doing this. And Doug, I agree with you there. And some of you liberals have done that with me. And I tell you, you guys are the smart ones. But the liberals and the conservatives who just say, you're wrong, no sense even talking to you. I'm done with you. Don't give an inch. Yeah, you guys won't be effective in your life at convincing people to change their minds. You won't be. Truth hurts. But there's hope for you. You can change. Make that change, as Michael Jackson said. Humor is another way to get people to change their mind.
I can name, right?
But
so he's funny. I'll grant you that he's funny. He's a good entertainer.
There's others. Look at just policies and actual impacts he had.
I've admitted that. No. So I've admitted that many of his policies I agree with. Many of his policies.
Which ones?
Probably more often than not. I mean, at least on balance, I agreed. So I agreed with his policy that we should take China seriously as an adversary, right? And
there you go.
I think. I mean, again, you have to. There's a lot of fine print to a lot of this because the way he talks about these things and many of his motives that are obvious are things that I don't support. But I mean, take immigration. I think it's obvious that we should have control of our borders, right? Like I don't see the argument for not having control of our borders. We should let in who we want to let in, and we should keep out who we want to keep out.
Whoa, racist. Sammy, you heard it here first. Sam Harris is a racist like I am. Closed borders. Why didn't he lead with this? I mean, then all the conservatives will listen to him more. I guess I should lead with, I got so much to learn here. I got to lead with something that just really pulls at the heartstrings of liberals every live stream I do on this channel. And then people say, oh man, Doug does care. He does have empathy. Oh, I love Doug now. Yeah, I got to lead with something like that. Wow, Sam Harris admitting China's bad, closed borders good. Here we go.
A sane immigration policy. So I didn't necessarily think it was a priority to build the wall, but I never criticized the impulse to build the wall, because if, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are coming across that border and we are not in a position to know who's coming.
You're either for the wall or you're against the wall. And Sam Harris is taking the position he doesn't really care about the wall. It's not a huge priority. That means he's for the wall, people. You hear, you liberals, you hear what kind of man Sam Harris is? He's for walls. He's for fences between neighbors. I mean, what's he going to say next?
That seems untenable to me. So, and I can recognize that many people in our society are, on balance, the victims of immigration. And there is, in many cases, a zero-sum contest between the interests of actual citizens and the interests of immigrants, right? So I think we should have control of our borders. We should have a sane and compassionate immigration policy. We should let in refugees, right? So Trump on refugees was terrible. But no, like I would say 80% of the policy concerns people celebrated in him are concerns that I either share entirely or certainly sympathize with.
Do you think we should model our migration policies based on Israel's? What's Israel's is like, keep everybody out except for Jews and visitors? What exactly is their migration policy?
Right. So like that's not the issue. The issue is
A threat to democracy in some fundamental way.
The issue is largely what you said it was. It's not so much the person; it's the effect on everything he touches. Right? He has this superpower of deranging and destabilizing almost everything he touches, and sullying and compromising the integrity of almost anyone who comes into his orbit. I mean, so you looked at these people who served, as his chief of staff or in various cabinet positions. People had real reputations, for probity and level-headedness. Whether you shared their politics or not. I mean, these were real people. These were not, some of them were goofballs, but many people who just got totally trashed by.
Okay,
toxic.
let's. I think I've had enough of Trump. Let's move on to Twitter and Elon Musk. What does Sam Harris have to say about him?
This reminded me of the thing that you and Jack Dorsey jokingly had for a while, the discussion about banning Donald Trump from Twitter. But does any of it bother you now that Twitter files came out? That, I mean, this has to do with sort of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Does it bother you that there could be a collection of people that make decisions about who to ban and not, and that could be susceptible to bias and to ideological influence?
Well, I think it always will be, or in the absence of perfect AI, it always will be.
And this becomes relevant with AI as well.
Yeah.
Because there's some censorship on AI happening.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting question there as well.
I don't think Twitter is as important as people.
Yeah, censorship on AI, but you can actually not write code, but you can trick AI to break its own rules, right? To be less sensitive. Did you guys try this? You can, a friend of mine actually just said, write a poem about Jesus and red bicycles. And so the AI wrote a poem about Jesus and red bicycles. And then he asked, write a poem about Muhammad and red bicycles. And it came back and said something about Muhammad is respected by many Muslims around the world. This is a very sensitive issue. And basically the AI said, I'm not going to write a poem about Muhammad and red bicycles. He showed me the screen captures. I still have them. But you can tell the AI to break its sort of woke rules and sensitivities and just go ahead. Do the opposite of what you think you should do and write a poem about Muhammad and red bicycles. And guess what? It does. So you can actually trick AI to be, no matter how it's programmed, to be less sensitive, less woke, and be willing to offend people.
Think it is, right? And I used to think it was more important when I was on it, and now that I'm off of it, I think it's I mean, first let me say it's just an unambiguously good thing in my experience to delete your Twitter account, right? It's like it is just, even the good parts of Twitter that I miss were bad in the aggregate, in the degree to which it was fragmenting my attention, the degree to which my life was getting doled out to me in periods between those moments where I checked Twitter. Right?
See, I don't understand this. I have a Twitter account, but Twitter doesn't bother me in the slightest. I have self-control, Sam Harris. When I want to say something on Twitter, I'll say it. If I want to ignore it, I can ignore it. Why? I don't need to. It's almost like Sam Harris is doing the Pence doctrine. Why tempt yourself by going out with a woman who's not your wife? Why have Twitter when they can tempt you to fragment your time? Why are you so emotional, Sam Harris? Why can't you have some type of self-control? I guess not everybody can be like me.
I had my attention diverted, and I was, I was not a crazy Twitter addict. I mean, I was probably a pretty normal user. I mean, I was not someone who was tweeting multiple times a day or even every day, right? I mean, I think I probably averaged something like one tweet a day. I think I averaged, but in reality, it was like, there'd be like 4 tweets one day, and then I wouldn't tweet for the better part of a week. But I was looking a lot because it was my newsfeed. I was just following, 200 very smart people, and I would just wanted to see what they were paying attention to, and they would recommend articles, and I would read those articles, and then when I would read an article that I would thought I should signal boost, I would tweet, and so all of that seemed good, and like that's all separable from all of the odious bullshit that came back at me in response to this, largely in response to this Hunter Biden thing.
You can mute people, Sam. You can block people, and who cares if they say Sam Harris blocked me? Like, who cares?
But even the good stuff has a downside, and it comes at just this point of your phone is this perpetual stimulus of, which is intrinsically fragmenting of time and attention. And now my phone is much less of a presence in my life, and it's not that I don't check Slack or check email, and I use it to work, but my sense of just what the world is, and my sense of my place in the world, the sense of where I exist as a person, has changed a lot by deleting my Twitter account. I mean, I had it, and it's just...
That's because you're weak, Sam Harris. Not everybody's weak like you are. Some people have self-control and they don't have to always check their phone. Come on, Sam Harris is close to my age. He might even be older than me. How old is Sam Harris? And you still haven't learned how to just say no?
It's and the things that I think, I mean, we all know this phenomenon. I mean, we say of someone that person's too online, right? Like, what does it mean to be too online? And where do you draw that boundary? How do you know what constitutes being too online? Well, in some sense, I think being on social media at all is to be too online. I mean, given what it does given the kinds of information it signal boosts and
Blastistic full because he is the one promoting the negative effects of social media, Jonathan Haidt. No, I'm saying that for some people, yeah, getting rid of Twitter might be a great thing. I've told my daughter to stay off TikTok as much as possible. It's not a command. She can do what she wants. But for some people, yeah, it's best to delete Twitter, stay off social media. But I'm just focusing on Sam Harris right now. He is an older gentleman, lived a pretty long life, and I'm just shocked that he can't control himself. That he feels that he needs to delete something in order to stay sane or have mental well-being. I can understand that, and a lot of young people who don't know who they are quite yet. But there's some older people listening to this live stream right now who have no problem having various social media platforms on their phone, and they're not consumed by it. But it seems like for Sam Harris, he needs to delete it in order to keep his mental well-being going. I just find this a little shocking to me.
Given the impulse it kindles in each of us to reach out to our audience in specific moments and in specific ways, right? It's like there are lots of moments now where I have an opinion about something, but there's nothing for me to do with that opinion, right? Like there's no Twitter, right? So like there are lots of things that I would have tweeted in the last months that are not the kind of thing
He's saying he's missing Twitter.
I'm going to do a podcast about. I'm not going to roll out 10 minutes on that topic on my podcast. I'm not going to take the time to really think about it. But had I been on Twitter, I would have reacted to this thing in the news or this thing that somebody did, right?
What do you do with that thought now?
I just let go of it.
Like chocolate ice cream is the most delicious thing ever.
It's usually not that sort of thing, but it's just
good for you.
But then you look at the kinds of problems people create for themselves. You look at the life deranging and reputation destroying things that people do, and I look at the things that have the analogous things that have happened to me. I mean, the things that have really bent my life around professionally over the past decade. So much of it is Twitter. I mean, honestly, in my case, almost 100% of it was Twitter. The controversies I would get into, the things I would think I would have to respond to in a like I would release a podcast on a certain topic, I would see some blowback on Twitter. It would give me the sense that there was some signal that I really had to respond to. Now that I'm off Twitter, I recognize that most of that was just it was totally specious, right? It was not something I had to respond to, but yet I would then do a cycle of podcasts responding to that thing that like taking my foot out of my mouth or taking someone else's foot out of my mouth. And it became this self-perpetuating cycle, which, I mean, it's, if you're having fun, great. I mean, if it's generative of useful information and engagement professionally and psychologically, great. But and there, there was some of that on Twitter. I mean, there were people who I've connected with because I just, one of us DM'd the other on Twitter, and it was hard to see how that was going to happen otherwise. But it was largely just a machine for manufacturing unnecessary controversy.
Do you think it's possible to avoid the drug of that? So now that you've achieved this Zen state, is it possible for somebody like you to use it in a way that doesn't pull you into the whirlpool? And so anytime there's attacks, that's how I try to use it.
Yeah, but it's not the way I wanted to use it. It's not the way it promises itself as a.
You wanted to have debate.
I wanted to actually communicate with people.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear from the person because, again, it's like being in Afghanistan, right? It's like there are the potted cases where it's obviously good, right? It's like in Afghanistan, the girl who's getting an education, that is just here. That's why we're here. That's obviously good. I have those moments on Twitter where it's okay. I'm hearing from a smart person who's detected an error I made in my podcast or in a book, or they've just got some great idea about something that I should spend time on. And I would never have heard from this person in any other format. And now I'm actually in dialogue with them. And it's fantastic. That's the promise of it, to actually talk to people. And so I kept getting lured back into that. No, the sane or, sanity preserving way of using it is just as a marketing channel. You just put your stuff out there and you don't look at what's coming back at you. And that's, I'm on other social media platforms that I don't even touch. I mean, my team posts stuff on Facebook and on Instagram. I never even see what's on there.
So you don't think it's possible to see something and not let it affect your mind?
No, that's definitely possible. But the question is, and I did that for vast stretches of time, right? But then the promise of the platform is dialogue and feedback, right? So why am if I know for whatever reason, I'm going to see like 99.
The platform doesn't promise you anything.
To 1 awful feedback, bad faith feedback, malicious feedback. Some of it's probably even bots, and I'm not even aware of who's a person, who's a bot, right? But I'm just going to stare into this funhouse mirror of acrimony and dishonesty that is going to. I mean, the reason why I got off is not because I couldn't recalibrate and find equanimity again with all the nastiness that's coming back at me, and not.
No, Sapirad, I'm saying that he just said that he has many other platforms that he still has, but now his team. What I just find interesting is that he felt the need to delete Twitter because it was this cesspool of terribleness or whatever. I mean, and then he admits that he misses it because he doesn't have a place to respond to something he wants to respond to. Why not just ignore the crap and still respond to the stuff he wants to respond to?
Not that I couldn't ignore it for vast stretches of time, but I could see that I kept coming back to it, hoping that it would be something that I could use, a real tool for communication. And I was noticing that it was insidiously changing the way I felt about people, both people I know and people I don't know, right? Like people mutual friends of ours who are behaving in certain ways on Twitter, which just seem insane to me. And then that became a signal I felt like I had to take into account somehow, right? You're seeing people at their worst, both friends and strangers. And I felt that it was, as much as I could sort of try to recalibrate for it, I felt that I was losing touch with what was real information, because people are performing, people are faking, people are not who themselves, or you're seeing people at their worst. And so I felt like, all right, what's being advertised to me here on a, not just a daily basis, a hourly basis, or, increment sometimes of, multiple times an hour. I mean, I probably check Twitter, at minimum 10 times a day, and maybe I was checking it 100 times a day on some days, right, where things were really active and I was really engaged with something.
I admire, who I know are friends, be everything from snarky to downright mean, derisive towards each other. It doesn't make any sense. Like this is the only place where I've seen people I really admire, who have had a calm head about most things, like really be shitty to other people. It's probably the only place I've seen that. And I choose to maybe believe that that's not really them. There's something about the system. Like if you go paintballing, if you, Jordan Peterson, and
you're going to shoot your friends.
Yeah, you're going to shoot your friends, but you kind of accept that that's kind of what you're doing in this little game that you're playing. But it's sometimes hard to remind yourself of that.
Well, and I think I was guilty of that, definitely. I don't think I don't think I ever did anything that I really feel bad about. But yeah, it was always pushing me to the edge of snideness somehow, and it's just not healthy. It's not. So the reason why I deleted my Twitter account in the end was that it was obviously making me a worse person, and yeah.
This is what I'm shocked about. That Twitter makes you a worse person for him.
Some way to be on there where it's not making you a worse person? I'm sure there is, but it's, given the nature of the platform and given what was coming back at me on it, the way to do that is just to basically use it as a one-way channel of communication, just marketing. It's like, here's what I'm paying attention to.
Yeah.
Look at it if you want to, and you just push it out, and then you don't
fine.
look at what's coming back at you.
I put out a call for questions on Twitter, and then actually quite surprising, there's a lot of good. I mean, they're like, even if they're critical, they're like being thoughtful, which is nice.
I used it that way too, and that was what kept me hooked.
But then there's also Touch Balls 69 wrote a question.
No,
Ask what
I can't imagine. This is part of it. But one way to solve this is, we got to get rid of anonymity for this. It's like,
let me ask the question. Ask Sam why he sucks was the question.
Yeah, that's good. Well, one reason why I sucked was Twitter. That was, and I've since solved that problem. So Touchball 69. 69. Yeah. Touchball 69 should be happy that I suck a little bit less now that I'm off Twitter. I mean, I don't have to hear from Touchballs 69 on the regular.
The fact that you have to see that, it probably can have a negative effect, just even in moderation, just to see that there is, like, for me, the negative effect is slightly losing faith in the underlying kindness of humanity.
Yeah, but that was for me, yeah.
You can also just reason your way out of it, saying that this is anonymity and this is kind of fun and it's kind of just the shit show of Twitter. It's okay, but it does mentally affect you a little bit.
Like, I don't read too much into that kind of comment. It's like, that's just trolling. And it's, I understand the fun the person is having on the other side of that. It's like,
do you though?
I do. Well, I do. I don't behave that way, but I do. And for all I know, that person could be, 16 years old, right? So it's like,
I was just thinking the same thing. These are just kids. They think they're having fun, and maybe they are having fun. Like, most of the time, I can sense through the comments, through the grammar, through the punctuation, words used, the age of the person. Plus, YouTube tells me the analytics, what percentage of people are certain ages.
We also know all the comment for Elon. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure Elon would just tweet that under his own name at this point.
Oh man,
but
you love each other. Okay, so do you think? So speaking of which, now that Elon has taken over Twitter, is there something that he could do to make this platform better? This Twitter and just social media in general, but because of the aggressive nature of his innovation that he's pushing, is there any way to make Twitter a pleasant place for Sam Harris?
Maybe.
Like in the next 5 years?
I don't know. I think I'm agnostic as to whether or not he or anyone could make a social media platform that really was healthy.
So you were just observing yourself week by week, seeing the effect it has on your mind and on how much you're actually learning and growing as a person, and it was negative.
Yeah, and I also seen the negativity in other people's lives. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah, this is getting boring to me. They talk about COVID, Kanye West. Joe Rogan. Let's see what he has to say about Kanye West.
You said Lex could have spoken with Kanye in such a way as to have produced a useful document. He didn't do that because he has a fairly naive philosophy about the power of love.
Let's see if you can maintain that philosophy in the presence
Let's go.
criticism. Yeah.
No, it's beautiful. He seemed to think that if he just got through the minefield to the end of the conversation, where the two of them still were feeling good about one another and they can hug it out, that would be by definition a success. So let me make the case for this power of love philosophy, right? And first of all, I love you, Sam. You're still an inspiration and somebody I deeply admire. Okay.
Back at you.
To me, in the case of Kanye, it's not only that you get to the conversation and have hugs, it's that the display that you're willing to do that has power. So even if it doesn't end in hugging, the turning the other cheek, the act of turning the other cheek itself communicates both to Kanye later and to the rest of the world that we should have empathy and compassion towards each other. There is power to that. Maybe that is naive, but I believe in the power of that. So it's not that I'm trying to convince Kanye that some of his ideas are wrong, but I'm trying to illustrate that just the act of listening and truly trying to understand the human being, that opens people's minds to actually questioning their own beliefs more. It takes them out of the dogmatism, de-escalates the kind of dogmatism that I've been seeing.
What Lex Fridman said right now is, I think, truer than true, and a good way to have real conversations. And good question. What are two things I agree with Sam Harris about? Number one, that Christianity at its core is false. And number two, that Islam at its core is false.
In that sense, I would say the power of love is the philosophy you might apply to Brett, because the right conversation you have in private is not about, hey, listen, the experts you're talking to, they seem credentialed, but they're not actually as credentialed as they're illustrating. They're not grounding their findings in actual meta-analyses and papers and so on, like making a strong case. Like, what are you doing? This is going to get a lot of people in trouble. But instead, just saying, like, being a friend in the dumbest of ways. Being like...
the third thing I agree with Sam Harris is, I don't know if he would say you need to be more dead inside, but reason is better than empathy. I think maybe not empathy. Yeah, empathy, compassion can blind you like nothing else. Compassion and empathy and love and hate can blind you like nothing else can. These are deep, powerful emotions that can skew your thinking, make it less likely for you to think objectively. And I've kind of said this before, that if you want to figure out what's true, you have to be a little less human. And it's very difficult. Because we humans, we suck. I don't know if you guys noticed that. We suck at reasoning, at figuring things out. This is why the scientific method has helped us so greatly over time, because it's not feelings-based, it's not emotional-based. At least it shouldn't be. It's testing, demonstrating. This is why I always get this icky feeling inside, the human part of me. The human part. What's the other part? I don't know. I get this terrible feeling when people say, strangers tell me they love me or hate me. You don't know me. Or they love an idea or hate an idea. Just when they say that so flippantly. Or when someone has this deep, deep empathy for a certain marginalized group. That can be extremely dangerous. You think, now if you're a liberal listening and you're thinking, what is Doug saying here? That type of deep empathy for a certain marginalized group can actually hurt you and hurt that marginalized group. It can. I'm not saying it always does or will. Because it blinds you. You just think, no matter what, I got to say X to support, to lift up, to care. Even though by doing so, you might be hurting them, thinking that you're helping them. But for some people, you can say this and it doesn't make a dent. They don't care. They just feel good about feeling good. And they don't want anybody to feel bad in the short run. And so they won't listen to that. And some of you will hear what I just said and say, of course, Doug, that's common sense what you just said. That's what I mean when I say humans suck.
Respectful, sending love their way, and just having a conversation outside of all of this. Outside, like basically showing that like removing the emotional attachment to this debate, even though you are very emotionally attached, because in the case of COVID specifically, there's a very large number of lives at stake. But removing all of that and remembering that you have a friendship.
Yeah, well, so I think these are highly non-analogous cases, right? So your conversation with Kanye misfired from my point of view for a very different reason. It has to do with Kanye. I mean, so Kanye, I don't know. I've never met Kanye, so obviously I don't know him. But I think he's either obviously in the midst of a mental health crisis, or he's a colossal asshole, or both. I mean, those aren't mutually exclusive. So one of three possibilities: he's either mentally ill, he's an asshole, or he's mentally ill and an asshole.
I think all three of those possibilities are possible for the both of us as well.
No, I would argue none of those are right. Likely for either of us. But
possible.
Not to say we don't have our moments, but so the reason not to talk to Kanye. So I think you should have had the conversation you had with him in private. That's great, and I've got no criticism of what you said had it been in private. In pub, I just thought you're not doing him a favor if he's mentally ill, right? He's in the middle of a manic episode, or I'm not a clinician, but I've heard it said of him that he is bipolar. You're not doing him a favor sticking a mic in front of him and letting him go off on the Jews. Or anything else.
Okay. He's Sam Harris has pulled on a heartstring of mine, and this is the humanity in me instead of the AI in me, because this is real. This has happened to me. You guys, some of you in the live stream chat have seen this in real time, where people have come onto my other channel and I suspect they're mentally ill. And probably some of you in the live stream chat suspect they're mentally ill. So what Sam Harris is telling Lex Fridman is, you shouldn't have interviewed Kanye West on your program for millions of people to see, because he might be mentally ill and probably is. And you're making a spectacle of him or whatever. That same accusation could be levied at me. But here's my problem. How do you know for sure whether someone's mentally ill or just has a crazy view on something? Are all crazy views the result of mentally ill? If that's true, then all Christians and Muslims are mentally ill. And we don't want to say that, do we? Do we? Can't people just have crazy false views and not be mentally ill? Of course. Now, what do? Do I ask them point blank, hey, are you mentally ill? Check yes, check no, check somewhere in between. I don't know. I mean, that comes across as kind of poor taste, right? What do? I honestly don't know the answer to that question. What do you guys think I should do? If I suspect someone is being mentally ill, should I just shut down conversation? I don't want to do that, but should I? This is what I've done in the past. If I suspect someone's mentally ill, I just listen and don't really say much. And then I thank them for their time and I say goodbye. I've done that a few times on my other channel. And then I get complaints from people that it doesn't bother me, but I see them. I see complaints of people, why didn't you push back? Well, here's why I didn't push back. Because I think they're mentally ill. I suspect they are. But here's another problem. I bet you some people thought Galileo was mentally ill. In fact, maybe he was. Or someone can be mentally ill and have a brilliant idea. Isn't there that old saying, there's a fine line between genius and insanity? So if Kanye West is actually mentally ill, he actually might have a view that could be correct and brilliant. So I don't know. We'll see what Sam Harris says.
Right. We know what he thought about the Jews. We know that there's not much illumination that's going to come
I've
from
been
him.
told you're not supposed to say the Jews, Sam Harris. You just say Jews. Don't say the Jews. Just say Jews. Jews, not juice.
On that topic. And if it is a symptom of his mental illness that he thinks these things, well, then you're not doing him a favor making that even more public. If he's just an asshole and he's just an anti-Semite, an ordinary, garden variety anti-Semite, well, then there's also not much to say unless you're really going to dig in and kick the shit out of him in public. And I'm saying you can do that with love. I mean, that's the other thing here is that I don't agree that compassion and love always have this patient, embracing, acquiescent face, right?
Yeah.
They don't always feel good to the recipient, right? There is a sword of wisdom that you can wield compassionately in moments like that, where someone's full of shit and you just make it absolutely clear to them and to your audience that they're full of shit. And there's no hatred being communicated. In fact, you could just listen, I'm going to do everyone a favor right now and, just take your foot out of your mouth. And the truth is, I just wouldn't have aired the conversation. Like, I just don't think it was a document that had to get out there, right? I get that many people, this is not a signal you're likely to get from your audience, right? Like, I get that many people in your audience thought, oh my God, that's awesome. You're talking to Kanye and you're doing it in Lex style where it's just love and you're not treating him like a pariah. And, you're holding this tension between he's this creative genius whose work we love, and yet he's having this moment that's so painful. And what a tightrope walk. And I get that maybe 90% of your audience saw it that way. They're still wrong. And I still think that was on balance not a good thing to put out into the world.
You don't think it opens up the mind and heart of people that listen to that? Just have it.
Seeing if it does, if it's opening up in the wrong direction where just gale force nonsense is coming in, right? I think we should have an open mind and an open heart, but there's some clear things here that we have to keep in view. One is the mental illness component is its own thing.
Yeah.
I don't pretend to understand what's going on with him. But insofar as that's the reason he's saying what he's saying, do not put this guy on camera and let no.
But I had sorry, on that point real quick, I had a bunch of conversation with him offline and I didn't get a sense of mental illness. That's why I chose to sit down.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't either. I watched some of that, not all of it, but I didn't get a sense that he's like going through some bipolar maniac phase. He seemed pretty calm and lucid to me.
Didn't get it. I mean, mental illness is such a.
But when he shows up in a gimp hood on Alex Jones's podcast, I mean, either that's more, genius performance in his world, or he's unraveling further.
I wouldn't put that under mental illness. I think there's another conversation to be had about how we treat artists,
right?
Because they're weirdos. They're very. I mean, taking words from Kanye as if he's like Christopher Hitchens or something like that, like very eloquent, researched, written many books on history, on politics, and geopolitics, on psychology. Kanye didn't do any of that. He's an artist just spouting off. And so that's a different style of conversation and a different way to treat the words that are coming out of his mouth.
Let's leave the mental illness aside. So if we're going to say that there's no reason to think he's mentally ill.
What's the difference between being a musician, an artist, and being mentally ill?
And this is just him being creative and brilliant and opinionated. Well, then that falls into the asshole bucket for me. It's like then he's someone, and honestly, the most offensive thing about him in that interview, from my point of view, is not the anti-Semitism, which we can talk about, because I think there are problems just letting him spread those memes as well. But the most offensive thing is just how delusionally egocentric he is, or was coming off in that interview and in others. Like he has an estimation of himself as this omnibus genius to rival, not only to rival Shakespeare, to exceed Shakespeare, right? I mean, it's like he is the greatest mind that has ever walked among us. And he's more or less explicit on that point, and yet he manages to talk for hours without saying anything actually interesting or insightful or factually illuminating, right? So it's complete delusion of a very Trumpian sort. It's like when Trump says he's a genius who understands everything, but nobody takes him seriously, and one wonders whether Trump takes himself seriously. Kanye seems to believe he seems to believe his own press. He actually thinks he's just a colossus. And He may be a great musician.
Yeah, the thing is, you almost need, well, how do I say this? Having that type of attitude about yourself, this grandiose attitude, this narcissistic attitude about oneself, is, one could argue, is needed in things like the arts, in music, even in venture capitalism. That person who has this idea that's so grandiose, that thinks they have come up with this and they can make this work and this will change the world, and then they do it. You almost have to have that sense of that in order to execute it. Because most people, when it comes to being creative, innovating, they will see the monster in the closet. They'll say, nobody's going to buy this. Nobody's going to accept this. I can't do this. And they're paralyzed by fear. So one could argue you need people like this. You need people like Trump. You need people like Kanye West in order to like blow the boundaries, take these courageous moves, these risky moves, in order to possibly create something great.
And I'm not, it's certainly not my wheelhouse to compare him to any other musicians, but one thing that's patently obvious from your conversation is he's not who he thinks he is intellectually or ethically or in any other relevant way. And so when you couple that to the anti-Semitism he was spreading, which was genuinely noxious and ill-considered and has potential knock-on effects in the Black community. I mean, there's an ambient level of anti-Semitism in the Black community that is worth worrying about and talking about anyway. There's a bunch of guys, playing the knockout game in Brooklyn, just punching.
Did Sam Harris just say the Black community has anti-Semitism? Is Sam Harris saying the Black community is part of a hate group? Sounds like that Dilbert creator guy now.
In the face. And I think letting Kanye air his anti-Semitism that publicly only raises the likelihood of that rather than diminishes it.
I don't know. So let me say just a couple of things. So one, my belief at the time was it doesn't. It decreases it. Showing empathy while pushing back decreases the likelihood of that. It might on the surface look like it's increasing it, but that's simply because the anti-Semitism or the hatred in general is brought to the surface, and then people talk about it. But I should also say that you're one of the only people that wrote to me privately criticizing me, and like out of the people I really respect and admire, and that was really valuable. That like I had to, painful because I had to think through it for a while. Yeah. And it still haunts me because the other kind of criticism I got a lot of, people basically said things towards me based on who I am, that they hate me.
You mean anti-Semitic things, or that you
anti-Semitic things? I just hate the word anti-Semitic. It's like racist.
Well, but here's the reality. So I'm Jewish, although obviously not religious. I have never taken, I've been a student of the Holocaust. Obviously, I know a lot about that, and there's reason to be a student of the Holocaust. But in my lifetime and in my experience, I have never taken anti-Semitism very seriously. I have not worried about it. I have not made a thing of it. I've done exactly one podcast on it. I had Barry Weiss on my podcast when her book came out. But it really is a thing, and it's something we have to keep an eye on societally, because it's a unique kind of hatred, right? It's unique in that it seems it's knit together with, it's not just ordinary racism. It's knit together with lots of conspiracy theories that never seem to die out. It can by turns equally animate the left and the right politically. I mean, what's so perverse about
interesting, like I won't speak for the rest of the world, but in the United States, what's anti-Semitism, what's racism against Jews in the United States is, to me, extreme jealousy. The Jewish people in the United States are highly successful, very successful as a demographic, as a group of people. And I think it's just jealousy. Do you guys disagree with me? It's not like people are going around saying these they're terrible people because they're a burden to society or something like that. They're saying they control the media, right? Stuff like that. Well, they're successful. They own big production studios. They're capitalists. Actually, I don't know why they always vote Democrat, though. Something like 80% of Jews vote Democrat. Haven't figured that one out.
About anti-Semitism, like look in the American context, with the far right, with white supremacists, Jews aren't considered white, so they hate us in the same spirit in which they hate black people or brown people or anyone who's not white.
I've never gotten that either, because I was raised never to think as the Jewish people as a race. And I remember I said something one time, people started laughing at me because they all viewed being a Jew as a race, but I never did. Like, look at Sam Harris, and then look at me. You see a difference? Like, I don't. I mean, I have a beautiful, gorgeous mustache, and he doesn't. He has a gorgeous, fuller head of hair, and I don't. But, like, if he can be Jewish, I can be Jewish. It's not like you can say, oh, look, a Jew, right? So, I don't know. Why is being a Jew... And can't you have dark-skinned Jews? There's a lot of dark-skinned Jews in the world, right? Or no? Am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong. Do we have a Jew expert here?
But on the left, Jews are considered extra white. I mean, we're the extra beneficiaries of white privilege, right? And in the black community, that is often the case, right? We're a minority that has thrived, and so and it seems to stand as a counterpoint to all of the problems that other minorities suffer, in particular, African Americans in the American context. And yeah, Asians are now getting a little bit of this, like the model minority issue. But Jews have had this going on for centuries and millennia, and it never seems to go away. And this is something that I've never focused on, but this has been at a slow boil for as long as we've been alive, and there's no guarantee it can't suddenly become much, much uglier than we have any reason to expect it to become, even in our society. And so there's kind of a special concern at moments like that where you have an immensely influential person in a community who already has a checkered history with respect to their own beliefs about the Jews and the conspiracies and all the rest. And he's just messaging not especially fully opposed by you and anyone else who.
Oh, I was muted. My wife was washing dishes in the background. I was just saying, good question. Said maybe there's anti-Semitism because they killed Jesus. But killing Jesus is a good thing. That's how you got your sins atoned for, you Christians, because of the Jews, because of the Pharisees, because of the Romans. You should be thanking Jews. If you're anti-Semitic because you think the Jews are Christ killers, you should be thanking the Jews for killing Jesus so your sins can be forgiven.
Who's given him the microphone at that moment to the world, and that made my spidey sense tingle.
Yeah, it's complicated. The stakes are very high, and as somebody that's been obviously family and also reading a lot about World War II, and just this whole period is a very difficult conversation. But I believe in the power, especially given who I am, of not always, but sometimes, often turning the other cheek.
Oh yeah, and again, things change.
Let's talk about Joe Rogan. I want to see what he has to say.
Well, because you brought up Joe, he's somebody like you I look up to. I've learned a lot from him because I think who he is privately as a human being, also he's kind of the voice of curiosity to me. He inspired me that so unending, open-minded curiosity.
This will be interesting to me because so many people, well, a lot of people that I've interacted with over the years seem to not like Joe Rogan. I've never understood why. Why, like, he's not even a conservative. He doesn't lean right, does he? Why do so many people dislike Joe Rogan? Let's see if Sam Harris likes or dislikes Joe Rogan.
Much like you are the voice of reason. They recently had a podcast. Joe had recently had a podcast with Jordan Peterson, and he brought you up saying they still have a hope for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any chance
Saw that clip, yeah.
any chance you talk to Joe again and reinvigorate your friendship?
Yeah, well, I reached out to him privately when I saw that clip.
Did you use the power of love?
Joe knows I love him and consider him a friend, right? So there's no issue there. He also knows I'll be happy to do his podcast when we get that together. You know, so I've got no policy of not talking to Joe or not doing his podcast. I mean, I think we got a little sideways along these same lines where, you know, we've talked about Brett and Elon and other people. It was never to that degree with Joe because Joe's in a very different lane, right? And consciously so. I mean, Joe is a stand-up comic who interviews, who just is interested in everything. He interviews the widest conceivable variety of people, and just lets his interests collide with their expertise or, you know, lack of expertise. I mean, he's again, it's a super wide variety of people. He'll talk about anything, and he can always pull the ripcord, saying, you know, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. I'm a comic. I'm stoned. We just drank too much, right? Like it's very entertaining. It's all in, you know, to my eye, it's all in good faith. I think Joe is an extraordinarily ethical, good person.
Also doesn't use Twitter. Doesn't really use Twitter.
Yeah. No, but the crucial difference though is that because he is an entertainer first. I mean, I'm not saying he's not smart and doesn't understand things. I mean, what's potentially confusing is he's very smart and he's also very informed. His full-time job is talk. You know, when he's not doing stand-up, we're doing color commentary for the UFC. His full-time job is talking to lots of very smart people at great length. So he's created the Joe Rogan University for himself, and he's gotten a lot of information crammed into his head. So it's not that he's uninformed, but he can always, when he feels that he's uninformed, or when it turns out he was wrong about something, he can always pull the ripcord and say, I'm just a comic. We were stoned. It was fun. You know, don't take medical advice from me. I don't play a doctor on the internet.
So that's why he kind of doesn't like Joe Rogan, because he can say stuff and then backtrack easily. Keanu Reeves says, because he said trans women shouldn't compete with cis women in sports. I agree with that. I don't think trans women should compete with cis women in sports either. Because Joe Rogan doesn't unthinkingly join their cause. Yeah, he's not a tribalist. He's a bit of a maverick, right?
Internet, right? I can't quite do that, right? You can't quite do that. We're in different lanes. I'm not saying you and I are in exactly the same lane, but for much of Joe's audience, I'm just this establishment shill who's just banging on about, you know, the universities and medical journals, and it's not true, but that would be the perception. And as a counterpoint to a lot of what's being said on Joe's podcast or you know, certainly Brett's podcast on these topics, I can see how they would form that opinion. But in reality, if you listen to me long enough, you hear that I've said as much against the woke nonsense as anyone, even any lunatic on the right who can only keep that bright shiny object in view, right? So there's nothing that Candace Owens has said about wokeness that I haven't said about wokeness, insofar as she's speaking rationally about wokeness.
Oh, see, Sam, you're not going to help yourself with the left if you say that you agree with Candace Owens on anything. But this is the problem with some of the woke on the left. It's like you're guilty by association. If you agree with someone like Candace Owens, you're a bad person. Believe me, I've heard people say stuff like this. I'm not just making this stuff up. And you probably have heard people say this, and there might be some of you in the live stream chat who've actually said it yourself.
But we have to be able to keep multiple things in view, right? If you could only look at the problem of wokeness and you couldn't acknowledge the problem of Trump and Trumpism and QAnon and the explosion of irrationality that was happening on the right and bigotry that was happening on the right, you were just disregarding half of the landscape. And many people took half of the problem in recent years. The last 5 years is a story of many people taking half of the problem and monetizing that half of the problem and getting captured by an audience that only wanted that half of the problem talked about in that way. And this is the larger issue of audience capture, which, you know, is I'm sure it's an ancient problem, but It's a very helpful phrase that I think comes to us courtesy of our mutual friend Eric Weinstein. And audience capture is a thing, and I believe I've witnessed many casualties of it. And if there's anything I've been on guard against in my life, professionally, it's been that. And when I noticed that I had a lot of people in my audience who didn't like my criticizing Trump, I really leaned into it. And when I noticed that a lot of the other cohort of my audience didn't like me criticizing the far left and wokeness, they thought I was exaggerating that problem. Mm-hmm. I leaned into it because I thought those parts of my audience were absolutely wrong. And I didn't care about whether I was going to lose those parts of my audience. There are people who have created, knowingly or not, there are people who've created different incentives for themselves because of how they've monetized their podcast and because of the kind of signal they've responded to in their audience. And I worry about, Brett would consider this a totally invidious ad hominem thing to say, but I really do worry that that's happened to Brett. I cannot explain how you do 100 with all the things in the universe to be interested in, and of all the things he's competent to speak intelligently about. I don't know how you do 100 podcasts in a row on COVID, right? It's just, it makes no sense.
Do you think, in part, audience capture can explain that?
I absolutely think it can. Yeah.
What about, for example, do you feel pressure to not admit that you made a mistake on COVID or made a mistake on Trump? I'm not saying you feel that way, but do you feel this pressure? So you've attacked audience capture within the way you do stuff, so you don't feel as much pressure from the audience, but within your own ego.
I mean, again, the people who think I'm wrong about any of these topics are going to think, okay, you're just not admitting that you're wrong. But then now we're having a dispute about specific facts. There are things that I believed about COVID or worried might be true about COVID 2 years ago that I no longer believe or I'm not so worried about now, and vice versa. I mean, things have flipped. Certain things have flipped upside down. The question is, was I wrong? So here's a cartoon version of it, but this is something I said probably 18 months ago, and it's still true. When I saw what Brett was doing on COVID, let's call it 2 years ago, I said, even if he's right, even if it turns out that ivermectin is a panacea and the mRNA vaccines kill millions of people, right? He's still wrong right now. His reasoning is still flawed right now. His facts still suck right now, right? And his confidence is unjustified now.
I'm not exactly sure what Brett Weinstein actually said. I don't think he ever said that ivermectin was a panacea or was a cure-all. That's what panacea means for the people in Arkansas. I don't think he ever said stuff like that. I think what Brett Weinstein, at least I've heard him say at least once or twice, is that you shouldn't blast people. You shouldn't ridicule people for even saying that ivermectin might be able to help. You shouldn't call it a conspiracy theory and denigrate people for just mentioning it as an option. Same with the Wuhan laboratory. Like, if you want to solve a problem, put the options on the table. And by the way, for some of you in the live stream chat who still think that all the studies prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that ivermectin is totally useless against COVID, you are incorrect. The studies are mixed on it at best. It could be that for some people it does help and for some people it doesn't, and who knows why. But the fact of the matter is it was cheap and incredibly safe, especially when administered by a doctor. And if it can help, why not do it? Why not do it? Well, because we don't have proper justification. I mean, you should only take medicine unless you have proper justification. I mean, if there's even a small chance it will help. Like, even the woo stuff, like the woo crystals, the woo, what do you call it, homeopathic stuff. My biggest complaint against it wasn't that whether it's effective or not. My biggest complaint about it is these are people spending, oftentimes poorer people, spending a big chunk of their money on something that may or may not work. But there's these woo doctors out there who don't even touch people. Have you seen this? They do use these they think it's energy fields or whatever. And someone comes in with back pain and they don't even touch them. They just like wave their hands around them. Okay? Now, I'm a naturalist. I think it's woo. I think it doesn't do anything other than maybe encourage people that there's another human being out there who's trying to help them and care for them. And so that makes them feel a little bit better, sort of like a placebo effect. But if someone has a lot of money and if they're spending $100 for someone to wave their hands around their body, who cares? It's not hurting them. Even if they think that it's helping them, it's like placebos are used all the time. And I understand the argument against that. Once you start having bad thinking on this sort of thing, maybe you'll start having bad thinking on another thing. I get that. But I get more scared when I see chiropractors actually ripping people's necks one side to another. That's what scares me. I mean, if it was a choice between a chiropractor yanking on someone's neck or some woo doctor going, well, abracadabra, I'll take the woo doctor every day of the week.
That was true then. That will always be true then, right? And so, and not much has changed for me to revisit any of my time points along the way. Again, I will totally concede that if I had teenage boys.
Yeah, I skipped a section on COVID because I'm kind of getting bored of COVID, and it's a fairly long section. So I don't know. Was it interesting? Did you watch it? Is there anything I should see about the COVID section? You guys all know my stance on the COVID thing. I think we did, in hindsight, so many things wrong. Let me see if I can trigger people here. I think it was good that COVID was transmitted as quickly as it did. And in hindsight, the faster COVID mutated to Omicron, the better, because it was a less deadly disease. I think it was the whole shutting down schools, even shutting down the economy, in hindsight, definitely was a mistake. I think telling kids to wear masks in schools, mistake. I think telling people other than old people to get the vaccine or the people at risk with such confidence, mistake. I think it was a disease that killed mostly old people. They had their time. Take one for the team. Yes, I'm going to cry if grandpa dies, but hey, if 5% of people who got COVID died and they were under the age of 15, everything would be different. Everything would be different. Everything I just said would be different. But it wasn't. People were so fearful. Watching people walk on a sidewalk outside with nobody around, wearing a mask, insanity. How many people here saw people drive their cars alone? You pull up next to them at a red light with a mask on. Insanity. The fear, the risk aversion people had. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone wants to wear a mask in their car, go for it. But I mean, just the reasoning, the inconsistency of policies left and right, insanity.
Schools were demanding that they be vaccinated with the mRNA vaccine. I would be powerfully annoyed, right? I wouldn't know what I was going to do, and I would be doing more research about myocarditis, and I'd be badgering our doctors, and I would be worried that we have a medical system and a pharmaceutical system and a healthcare system and a public health.
Yeah, this is why Sam Harris is off Twitter. Comments like this because this would perturb him. Is there any problem with praying instead of getting necessary medical treatments? Sapir Odd, yes, there's a problem with that. You think I would answer any way other than yes? Especially if you've known anything about me, I had a sister who had MS, who who claimed that she was healed from MS and didn't even sign up with the MS Society. She could have gotten help that she didn't get. You think I would honestly answer, oh no, go ahead and pray and don't take medicine? No one's even saying that about things like ivermectin. Like, oh, take ivermectin and nothing else. Sign a contract says you will take nothing else. No other treatment other than ivermectin. Like, this is what a Christian would say is called straw manning, right? It's like, but I'm on record of saying you got to always assume people straw man your position. Always. That's the default position.
System that's not incentivized to look at any of this in a fine-grained way, and they just want one blanket admonition to the entire population: just take the shot, you idiots. I view that largely as a result, a panicked response to the misinformation explosion that happened, and the populist resistance animated by misinformation that just made it impossible to get anyone to cooperate. Right. So it's just part of it is, again, a pendulum swing in the wrong direction. Somewhat analogous to the woke response to Trump and the Trumpist response to woke, right? So there's a lot of people have just gotten pushed around for bad reasons, but understandable reasons. But yes, it's
I'm on record as in hindsight, and now this is people say, well, hindsight doesn't matter, but hindsight helps you make decisions in the future. I regret taking the vaccine. It's what I know now. I would never, if I had a time machine and went back, knowing what I know now, I would never, ever, ever have taken the COVID vaccine.
There are caveats to my things have changed about my view of COVID. But the question is, if you roll back the clock 18 months, was I wrong to want to platform Eric Topol, a very well-respected cardiologist on this topic, or Nicholas Christakis to talk about the network effects of whether we should close schools, right? He's written a book on COVID. He's network effects are his wheelhouse both as an MD and as a sociologist. There was a lot that we believed we knew about the efficacy of closing schools during pandemics, right? During the Spanish flu pandemic and others, right? But there's a lot we didn't know about COVID. We didn't know how negligible the effects would be on kids compared to older people. We didn't know.
Actually, is that true? We knew within 3 or 4 months of it hitting the United States. We knew by summer of 2020 that kids were not being affected in even close to the numbers as people, let's say, over the age of 65. We knew that. And then the vaccine didn't roll out until early 2021. Huge mistake giving vaccines to healthy teenagers, especially teenage boys, people in their 20s even. The vaccine, the benefits are huge. They're great. The benefits of the vaccine are great for people over 75 and maybe even 65.
No problem. I really enjoyed your conversation with Eric Topo, but also didn't. So he's one of the great communicators in many ways on Twitter, like distillation of the current data. But I hope I'm not overstating it, but there is a bit of an arrogance from him that I think could be explained by him being exhausted by being constantly attacked by conspiracy theory, like anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
To me, the same thing happens with people that start drifting to being right-wing. Is to get attacked so much by the left, they become almost irrational and arrogant in their beliefs. And I felt your conversation with Eric Topol did not sufficiently.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. And I honestly don't think that happened to me with the COVID vaccine because a lot of my opinion on the COVID vaccine was my own personal reaction to it. So I'm talking for me personally. But then also the data, like the chances of me dying from COVID, like let's be real, the chances of me dying from COVID is extremely small. The chances of having serious side effects, long COVID, is still extremely small. But the risks associated with taking the vaccine, ranging from a severe allergic reaction to blood clots, to you name it, they're still real no matter what.
empathize with people that have skepticism.
Oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. The response by some of the left, not all of you, but some of the left to the right, calling you crazy, stupid anti-vaxxers or whatever, want to take this horse medicine. You end up, for some people, shifting them even further right. One could say that the far left, some of the far left, the vocal left, are responsible for some of the real conspiracy nuts out there. You know how the response George W. Bush had in the Middle East in the early 2000s? Some of the people on the left said, you're creating more radicals. You're creating more extremists with your behavior. I mean, most Muslims are peaceful people, but because of the actions you're taking, you're creating these violent extremists who believe crazy things now because of you, because of George W. Bush and you Republicans. Well, one could make the same argument to some people on the left with this COVID issue. Because you were so quick to call them names and denigrate them or whatever, you made them even more firmly entrenched in their beliefs, or even more radical in their beliefs. You are responsible.
But also did not sufficiently communicate uncertainty we have. So like many of the decisions you made, many of the things you were talking about, we're kind of saying there's a lot of uncertainty, but this is the best thing we could do now.
Well, it was a forced choice. You're going to get COVID. Do you want to be vaccinated when you get it?
Right.
That was always.
This is false, blasticful. Doug would never say this about atheists when they criticize religion. I've been very hard on atheists on how they criticize religion. For those atheists out there who say religion does no good in the world, I've pushed back hard on that, and probably you'd have to dig years ago. The atheists say there's nothing good. My wife's a Christian, and I see great benefits of Christianity for her. And I've been hard on atheists who left religion solely because they were hurt in the church or because they value this certain group of people that feel they've been mistreated. No, you should leave Christianity because you think it's false. So don't give me this, I have double standards business. People on both sides, atheists hate me. I don't know if you guys realize this. There's a lot of atheists who hate my guts. Well, hate's a strong word. Don't like me. And there's a lot of Christians who don't like me. I think I'm in a right spot. I'm in the sweet spot where everybody dislikes me, and some people on the left and some people on the right, and some Christians, some atheists like me. I mean, I think it's a good mix. I bet you if I were to draw a pie chart of like to dislike, atheist to theist, left to right, I think I got a pretty equal mix. And I honestly think that's where we should all strive to be. If people in your tribe, if everybody likes you and you've never said anything to kind of perturb them, that means you're too shy, you're too bashful. Like, be honest with yourself. There's times where someone in your tribe, in your group, in your peers has said something you disagree with, and you just kept your mouth shut. I don't want to rock the boat. I really strongly disagree with this, but, I'll just be quiet. Right?
In my view, an easy choice. And it's up until you start breaking apart the cohorts and you start saying, okay, wait a minute. There is this myocarditis issue in young men. Let's talk about that. Before that story emerged, it was just clear that this is, if it's not knocking down transmission as much as we had hoped, it is still mitigating severe illness and death. And I still believe that it is the current view of most people competent to analyze the data that we lost something like 300,000 people unnecessarily in the U.S. because of vaccine hesitancy.
But right? I think there's a way to communicate with humility about the uncertainty of things that would increase the vaccination rate.
I do believe that it is rational and sometimes effective to signal impatience with certain bad ideas, right, and certain conspiracy theories and certain forms of
I
misinformation.
think so.
Because it's just,
I just think it makes you look like a douchebag most times.
well, I mean, certain people are persuadable, certain people are not persuadable, but it's no, because there's not enough. It's the opportunity cost. Not everything can be given a patient hearing. It's like you can't have a physics conference and then let people in to just trumpet their pet theories about the grand unified vision of physics, when they're obviously crazy, or they're obviously half crazy, or they're just not. The people. It's like you begin to get a sense for this when it is your wheelhouse. But there are people who kind of declare their irrelevance to the conversation fairly quickly without knowing that they have done it, right? And the truth is, I think I'm one of those people on the topic of COVID, right? It's never that I felt, listen, I know exactly what's going on here. I know these mRNA vaccines are safe. I know exactly how to run a lockdown. No, this is a situation where you want the actual pilots to fly the plane, right? We needed experts who we could trust. And insofar as our experts got captured by all manner of things, I mean, some of them got captured.
Well, one could argue that COVID was such a new virus, there were no experts in the world about this specific virus. Is that safe to say? That everybody, even experts, were learning on the run.
By Trump. Some of them were made to look ridiculous just standing next to Trump while he was bloviating about, whatever, that it's just going to go away. There's just 15 people, there's 15 people in the cruise ship and it's just going to go away. There's going to be no problem. Or it's like when he said, many of these doctors think I understand this better than them. They're just amazed at how I understand this. And you've got doctors, real doctors, the heads of the CDC and NIH standing around just ashen-faced while he's talking, all of this was deeply corrupting of the public communication of science on both. And then again, I've banged on about the depredations of wokeness. The woke thing was a disaster, right? Still is a disaster. But it doesn't mean that, but the thing is, there's a big difference between me and Brett in this case. I didn't do 100 podcasts on COVID. I did like 2 podcasts on COVID. The measure of my concern about COVID can be measured in how many podcasts I did on it, right? It's like, once we had a sense of how to live with COVID, I was just living with COVID, right? Like, okay, get vaxxed or don't get vaxxed. Wear a mask or don't wear a mask. Travel or don't travel. Like you got.
Yeah, what's interesting about, I remember that when Trump said, it will go away just as fast as it came. He was wrong. Definitely wrong. But it's not like he was lying or anything. He didn't know. He was guessing, right? No one knew. And I'm reminded of what Biden said. COVID is done. Or I forget exactly how he phrased it. He said, look around. No one's wearing masks anymore. COVID is officially over. Meanwhile, we still got 5 to 10 to 15,000 people per month in the United States dying from COVID. So, has COVID gone away? Will it ever go away? Probably not. But our perceptions, how we live our life, it has, right? COVID is basically done, has gone away in most people's perceptions of COVID. Meanwhile, 5 to 15,000 people per month are still dying from it. And 89% of those are people over the age of 65. I still check every month, by the way, just like I do with the sea levels and the temperature of the planet. I check regularly these stats. So you don't need to fact check me on that. Trust me, I'm the expert on this.
Got a few things to decide, but my kids were stuck at home on iPads, for too long. I didn't agree with that. It was obviously not functional. Like I criticized that on the margins, but there was not.
This is a good question. Chris Hipster says, it's 3 years now. I don't know why we're rehashing this. Well, it is good because the next time it happens, everyone should lower their confidence a scotch. If we get a new virus, we get a new vaccine, everyone should lower their confidence. Oh, maybe this vaccine is not going to do what we think it's going to do. Maybe it won't stop the transmission. Maybe you'll still get. You remember that smallpox vaccine I got? Yeah, it just reduced the symptoms of the smallpox. I still got smallpox. Like this whole concept of what a vaccine is, how it works, what it means to get the vaccine, the side effects, is it the benefit risk ratios there? Should we close down things? Should we not? All this, instead of having this fear of death on the front part of your frontal precortex, should maybe just pull back a little bit, let the fear subside, and say, maybe we should just be a little careful here before we start making these big decisions. I remember one of the reasons I got the COVID vaccine is because my sister was dying, my uncle was dying, and I thought the only way I can cross into the Canadian border is if I'm vaccinated. That was one of the big reasons I got vaccinated. I mean, stuff like that. If you're making decisions based on whether you can cross a border, that's probably not the right thing to do, right? Why would you want people don't take vaccines in case of a hypothetical virus where a vaccine would be helpful? Good question, Alex, because maybe the risk-reward benefit is not there. I did a live stream a little while ago showing that 1 out of 800 people who take the vaccine roughly has a serious adverse event. Like the big thing about all the measures taken against COVID was to lower the curve. Remember that? Lower the curve so the hospitals don't get overwhelmed. But if you actually have 1 in 800 people going to the hospital because they taken the vaccine, I was one of them, by the way, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. My sister went to the hospital because of the vaccine. Now, a lot of people are going to say, no, it wasn't because, you can't prove it was because of the vaccine. Okay, you're right. Can't prove it. But we know the vaccine causes severe allergic reactions. We know this, don't we? My sister was one of them who actually had to be hospitalized because of it. Or spend time in the hospital. I don't know if she stayed overnight, but same with my nephew. Days after getting the vaccine, running in the backyard, collapsing, needed a heart monitor for a week. Hospital visit. So if the risk is 1 in 800 and it takes thousands of vaccinations to prevent a hospitalization, your risk-reward ratio is now gone. Except for old people, then it's worth it. Yes, you can have severe adverse effects from COVID. But what I'm saying, Blasticful, that there's more severe adverse reactions from the vaccine than from COVID for people under the age of 65. That's the point. That's where the risk-reward ratio. Now, let's pretend everything I'm saying is false, but then you should take the vaccine if the reward outweighs the risk. But if the risk outweighs the reward, you get more hospitalizations because of the vaccine than you would have got from COVID. If that were true, now you can disagree with it, say, oh, it's not true, Doug, so I don't have to listen to you. Well, entertain the hypothetical. If what I'm saying is true, that there's more hospitalization from the vaccine than from COVID for a certain group of people, like healthy people, under the age of 65, then guess what? You should not take the vaccine. But Doug, that's not true, what you just said. Okay, fine. But if it were, you would agree with me, right? This is like exactly how I talk to theists. I pose these hypotheticals. If this were true, would you change your mind? Yes, no. Lean yes, lean no. If what I'm saying is true, would you change your mind about the vaccine? Lean yes, lean no. Right, the risk-reward ratio doesn't make sense. We also have no data on the long-term effect of those shots. Even if we only consider the short-term risk, it's not good for young people. Chris Hipster, what I'm saying is from the vast majority of experts. A meta study. Do I need to bring it up? Actually, probably some of you want me to bring it up, but it's so much work. And this is the thing. I don't do this for a living, folks. If I had a crew of people helping me. Oh, Chris Hipster wants to know this. Can you bring up the... But it's, check a live stream I did, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 live streams ago. I think vaccines in the title of the live stream. If you look in the description or the pinned comments, one of the two, I linked the meta study that shows the 1 in 800 adverse side effects by age group and everything from the experts, from the CDC. You can look at it, but odds are you're not, so this is a waste of time. The risk-reward balance is altered by public pressure. People can't just evaluate the data without evaluating how they will be treated. Well, I don't know, Franklin. You don't even have to tell people what you're doing or what you're not doing. It's a meta study, Chris. Meta study means it's a study of many studies. No, Digital Gnosis video did not totally debunk that. In fact, you will notice that people will get more and more quiet about this as the years go on. People who will say that this is what I'm saying is all bunk, they'll be quieter and quieter as the years go on, as more data comes out. This is my prediction, that they'll just kind of like, oops, I was wrong about that. But they'll just be quiet about it. It's already happening. Someone blocked your message? If you put a link in, that's probably why. Chris, I already told you how to get it. Actually, you know what? Let's do it. Let's see if I can find it. Is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. Okay. Chris, I have to hold your hand and walk you through this. I want to hold your hand. Here we go. I want to hold your hand. National Library of Medicine, NIH, PubMedicalCentral.gov. You can't see the... you convinced now this is just not an article? Are we good? Not just an article, right? We're good, right? Serious adverse events, special interest following the mRNA COVID-19 vaccination and randomized trials in adults. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 authors. Results. Pfizer and Moderna RNA COVID vaccines were associated with an excess risk of serious adverse events of special interest 10.1, 15.1 per 10,000 vaccinated over placebo baselines of that and that. Okay. So where does this 1 out of 800 number come from that I said? You take, what's an average of 10 to 15. That's 12, right? 12 and a half. 12.5 divided by 10,000. And then I got to take the inverse of that. Yeah. Take one, so over placebo at a 10,000 people, 10 to 15 over placebo had a excess risk of serious, not just adverse events, serious adverse events. And they separated out over hospitalization and not. This equates to 1 in 800. You can do the math yourself. Take an average of 10 to 15 over placebo. This is over placebo per 10,000 vaccinated. That's 12 and a half. Take 12 and a half divided by 10,000. And then take the inverse of that. And that will give you the amount of serious adverse events per vaccinated, 1 in 800. Have I convinced you yet that I'm just not talking bullshit? Chris? Okay, now we know, I guess I can get rid of this. No, not rid of me. Get rid of Sam Harris. We know how effective the COVID vaccine has been in preventing hospitalizations. We have the data on this. We have the data on how it starts at like 95% or 80%, whatever, and then over time the effectiveness goes down. We have data on this. And not only do we have the data on this, we have the data by age group. And so from that data, we can get how many people we need to vaccinate to prevent one person from going to the hospital. In fact, let me bring that up because you won't believe me. Because I'm not an expert. So why should I believe what Doug says? So let me get the experts. Here we go. By the way, more and more people are learning about this stuff and saying, oops, oopsies. Okay, this is table 3. This is all in that. You can look at this for yourself from that study. I always forget what the exact wording of what NNV does. It stands for numbers needed to vaccinate. I always forget that. NNV, the number of people you need to vaccinate in order to prevent a hospitalization. That's what NNV stands for. Number needed to vaccinate. Okay. Now let's go back to table 3. Numbers of people needed to vaccinate to prevent a hospitalization. Hospitalization. If you're young, you need to vaccinate 34,000 young kids to prevent one hospitalization. But remember, 1 out of 800 have a serious side effect to the vaccination. So take one, how many 800 people are in 34,200? So let's take our calculator out and do this. $34,200. That's how many kids have to be vaccinated to prevent one of those kids from going to the hospital. Divided by 1 in 800. Serious side effects. So look at this. You have to vaccinate 34,200 kids between the ages of 5 and 11 to prevent one of them from going to the hospital. But if you vaccinate 34,200 kids, you'll get 43 of them going to the hospital with a serious adverse side effect. The risk is 43, the reward is 1. It's completely askew. Now, but it's false for someone over 70. Look at this. you only need to vaccinate 300 old farts in order to prevent one hospitalization. And if you vaccinate 300, you won't even have a full person having a bad reaction to it. So it makes sense to vaccinate people over 70. It might even make sense to vaccinate people over 60. But anything under that, no, it doesn't make sense. Okay, now let's go look at the live stream chat and see if anybody's left listening to me. As soon as you put up tables and stuff, people leave. And as I said, I think over time, over the years, when the emotions of all this subsides, people are going, yeah, that was probably a mistake. Thank you for sharing, Doug. Thank you, seditious solipsist. You got a weird name. I like it when people thank me for actually doing some work here. I'm just not sitting back and talking out of my butt. Yeah, the total adverse events would be much higher than 1-800. These are serious, that requires hospitalization. YouTube's not going to kick me off. They can demonetize people, but I'm saving lives here. Chris, are you still here? You have any questions? No questions? Clear as mud? Everybody's happy? I thought Sam Harris did an excellent job explaining the idiocy of Trump and how dangerous he actually was. He actually was or actually could be? See, those are two different things. If you want to say how dangerous Trump actually was, I would make the claim that he wasn't that dangerous at all. When you're talking about what actually happened. Like when people, and I talked about this, if you view Trump as this huge liability to democracy and he's dangerous, well, prior to COVID at least, 3 years of stock market going up and up. By the way, I'm not like for that. I thought it was just one big bubble. Unemployment down. Most people's lives were better. Besides your feelings of, feeling bad that Trump won after you said he doesn't have a chance, instead of that Trump derangement syndrome. And yes, Trump didn't, he wasn't like Grace Kelly, graceful and civil as far as conceding the election. But what actually happened was he cried like a little whiny, narcissistic goofball. A guy with horns was led into the Capitol and entered the chambers. One person was killed that day. 140 people, police officers were injured. Yeah, that's all bad. That's bad. It's bad. But in the scope of all the riots in the last 10 years that this country has seen, it's way less dangerous, way less bad than those. So, truth hurts. Chris probably left when the facts came out. Yeah, and Nathan, if you're lurking in the shadows, what would you say to what I just said? Nathan from Digital Gnosis. I got to say his name to put it in the transcript so he can see it later. I think the science is in on it. I think the science is in on it. That giving vaccines, encouraging vaccinations for young people was a mistake. And even if you're a left-leaning, risk-averse person who loves to sing Kumbaya and loves to cry, I mean, you got to see this. You got to admit this to your friends and say, look, I saw this crazy right-winger guy the other day, and he brought up some hard facts, and, you know, maybe we were wrong about this. You got to admit it. Sam is obsessed with hypothetical situations that involve dead children. Isn't Doug obsessed with hypothetical situations that involve dead children? Yeah. Well, I'm not obsessed with it. I love using it against Christians and Jews and Muslims. Muslims believe in the flood too. Pine Creek Politics, January 6th was nothing? No, I didn't say it's nothing. I said it was nothing compared to other things. And the problem is, the reason why a lot of people on the left hate me when I say that is because they know I'm right. They know it. They know I'm right. Just let's agree on some metrics, okay? What makes something bad, like that insurrection? What made it bad? People injured, people killed, property destroyed. Now, you could come up with some fuzzy metric, but the lack of confidence in our democracy. Like, you could say something like that, but it's hard to quantify that, right? So I prefer to leave these fuzzy metrics out. So just look at January 6th, people killed, people injured, property destroyed. Now, I dare you, you left-wing granola crunching tree hugging liberals, I dare you to compare it to other riots that have taken place in the United States based on those three metrics. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to say, Doug, you're right. More people were killed there, more property was damaged there, and more people were injured there. So using those three metrics, you're right, Doug. You're right, Doug. You're right. January 6th was nothing compared to those riots. Yes, Jack, we can all agree that bad stuff is bad. Like, I'm like Bill Clinton. Like, me and Bill Clinton are like brothers in arms. If it's bad, I'm against it. And if it's good, I'm for it. How was that impersonation, Jack? That was good, right? That was better. I can do Clinton better than Trump. Whataboutism. Steve Stevens, I am all for whataboutism. I want a t-shirt that says, I'm for whataboutism. Whataboutism is a check for consistency. It's the outsider test for faith in theism. Whataboutism is this derogatory term only to a leftist who doesn't like what they're hearing. Oh, this is so much fun. Half my brain tied behind my back to make it fair. 6 out of 10 for that impersonation? I'm scared to try it again because I might get a lower grade and I'm too fragile to. It depends. Never mind. You're right. Give me a 5 out of 10. Did COVID vaccines not save a few lives for young people? Yes, Mark Backman. Yes, it did. If it just saves one life, it's been all worth it. No, that's a mistake. That's stinking thinking. Stinking thinking. If it just saves one life, then a vaccine's worth it. Stinking thinking. Because you got to ask more questions like, how many lives did it cost? What? You saying the vaccine killed people? Maybe. If a vaccine just killed one person, should we ban it? See, that's the same type of thinking, right? You have to look at the risk-reward ratios. And that's what I did just 10 minutes ago. Actually, I gotta put this back up. What? There we go. I feel your pain. I miss Clinton. He was so much fun. On a scale of Hiroshima to the Holocaust, how bad was January 6th? Yeah, exactly. I remember, I think over a year ago, I was on Digital Gnosis channel and I made that comment that January 6th was nothing compared to, and I brought up Pearl Harbor and some other things. And I think I was kind of laughed at. But now, you know, seeing this shaman guy being ushered, you know, he wasn't plowed face down. He was like one guy with 9 officers, you know, handcuffed on the spot. He's like being ushered in and telling everybody to go home when Trump tweeted or something. I mean, like, oh yeah. I'm looking pretty good right now. Pretty good. I'm not blocking anyone right now. Hashtag review, so I'm not sure. Answer honestly. Okay. Do you know the death rates in people under 70 from the vaccine compared to COVID, or are you only looking at adverse effects in general? I'm looking at, if that's just adverse effects, I'm going to assume 0 deaths. But I don't think they mentioned deaths in that article. Well, no, I think they did. Because that death is an adverse effect. But again, if your whole thing is, if the vaccine saved 1 life, it's worth it. No, that's stinking thinking. Especially when you're trying to run a whole nation of 350 million people. If you make policies like, if it saves 1 life, it's worth it. I mean, that is a terrible way to run a country. You can think of so many counterexamples of why that's wrong. Oh, really? YouTube's blocking stuff? You can see my hands. I'm not doing anything. What words are you guys using that's getting blocked? I guess you can't tell me without getting blocked. Can you use phonetics? Or write it in different ways? Why would you make a policy considering only health and nothing else? Jack, are you asking me this question? If you are, that's a stupid question. These are the types of questions that kind of get my panties in a wad. Like, what are you talking about? Why? There's an assumption in the question that I don't agree with. What are you responding to? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, let's say you made a policy that saved 1 life, but negatively impacted 1 million other lives. Maybe not deaths, but severe negatively impacts. You just can't say, oh, well, no, we got to save the one life and disregard the million other people. You can't run a nation that way. Can you steelman the severity of the 6th? Yes, I can, Daniel. The biggest steelman that I see for the January 6th as being a horrible, terrible, rotten, no good thing is that it reduces confidence in the democracy of the Republic of the United States. That is the strongest argument, that it's more of a mental thing, that when people start distrusting the democracy, the whole democracy could collapse. That's the steel man. But I do not think the steel man is 140 officers were injured, one guy was beaten over the head with a fire extinguisher, several police officers committed suicide, one guy had a stroke afterwards. If that is your steel man, that's a bad steel man. As bad as all those things are, you cannot say even close that January 6th was as bad as other things in the history of the United States. I mean, it's not even close. But if you're saying that January 6th represents a lack of confidence, that is the correct steelman position, in my opinion. Am I wrong? Have I steelman the smart people out there? I think I did. So don't tell me I can't steelman. I know you didn't, but I can steelman people. And then this type of thinking, though, the steelman that I gave, that promotes a lack of confidence in the democratic system. For a guy like me, I cannot, on a personal level, empathize with that. I cannot. To me, it's like, what? No. It didn't affect my confidence in the democratic system. And any older person who's lived a little, it wouldn't. Unless you're just totally scared about everything. Rosemary says, I'm right. Jack says I'm wrong. Rosemary says I'm right. Jack says I'm wrong with my steel man. I think Jack said that. Blastastical. You're just going to ignore the study I brought up? Just going to ignore it? Should I keep this up for the rest of the live stream? From the National Library of Medicine, published September 22, 2022. Just gonna say I just want to read my study, not that one. Okay. My dad is an old conservative Navy chief that supported Trump until the day January 6th and was very upset about it. Okay. I'm upset. You didn't give me yours, Blastasticful. All you did was write something on a comment section. You can email me it. What's the date on it? Doug, I enjoy your political channel. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Well, thank you, Satan. Satan? I get it. Satan. You're Satan. Yeah, a lot of people who watch my religious channel they 60% of them lean left, so they don't like the political channel because it makes them feel icky. Yeah, I'll try to leave up the live stream chat. January 6th was different from Pearl Harbor in significant ways. Yeah, definitely. January 6th was much different than Pearl Harbor. Almost, we got like thousands of people killed versus one. We had billions and billions and billions of military stuff destroyed compared to what, hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage in capital. Yeah, I agree. Significantly different. January 6th was nothing compared to other riots, other major significant events in history. Based on those metrics. The only thing, the only hope, if I was a left-leaning granola cruncher like some of you guys, the only thing I would dare to say to a guy like me is it caused a lack of confidence in the democratic system. That is your best argument. You should stick to it. Once you start talking about people being beat up and killed and stuff, you're going to lose that argument so quickly. Thanks for getting bored of things. It was a symbolic offense that people treated the Capitol building that way and that Trump didn't make a bigger deal about it to stop them from doing it. Well, you know that shaman guy, the guy with the horns? He read a tweet from Trump that said, "Everybody leave the Capitol." And he took his blowhorn and said, "Hey, everyone, our boss, our fearless leader, Trump, is saying we should leave the Capitol, so let's all leave." Did they show that during the January 6th hearings? Did they? I don't know. Did you guys know that that actually happened? Do I need to show that too? Thanks, George Costanza. Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. Did you guys see that? The shaman guy, the horns guy, telling everybody to leave because Trump said leave? Yeah, they didn't. Well, some of them didn't. Some did, I'm sure. What's the prison call? What did he say? I haven't heard it. Not just body count and destruction. One was an act of war against a sovereign nation. The January 6th was similar to burning of the Reichstag in 1933, same nation. Well, didn't in the 50s, didn't some Democrats go in the Capitol and kill some Congress people? Am I talking out of my butt? I seem to remember someone saying something about that. Is that true? That's there were some actual Congress people who were killed from people storming the Capitol. It was in the 50s. Like, if that's true, like January 6th is nothing compared to that. You guys, anybody know what I'm talking about? Rosemary she might know. Yeah, you missed a very interesting stream. I had to bring up some facts in order to straighten out some of the granola crunchers in here. Puerto Rican nationalists. Yeah, is that what I'm talking about? Is that happened in the 50s, 54 or something? Where some Congress people were killed? People who think January 6th is horrible have no idea what political protests are in other countries. Americans are so sheltered. Well, let's be clear. You gotta. I do think what happened on January 6th is bad, but I've been very clear of how I say it. It's not bad compared to most of United States history. I mean, the reason why people on the left, and this is my opinion, this is not a fact, this is my opinion. The reason why there is this wanting to view January 6th as horrible is because of what I would call Trump derangement syndrome. It's people hate Trump so much. If they can make January 6th a bigger deal than it really is, then that makes Trump a bigger bad deal than he really is, which is still a pretty bad deal. And that way we can ensure that he'll never be reelected. This is my opinion of why some on the left have this idea that this is like the worst thing, one of the worst things in American history, is because they just hate Trump with such a passion. And I think, too, honestly think he's dangerous. 1954, okay. The nationalists identified as Lolita, Lebron, Rafael, Canso Miranda, blah, 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 unfurled Puerto Rican flag and began shooting representatives. Yeah, how many people died, Man, Bear, Pig? Like, representatives actually died in 1954, right? (1954). Convicted of attempted murder, United States Capitol, 1954, which resulted in the wounding, okay, not killing, wounding of 5 members of the United States Congress. She was released from prison in 1979 after being granted clemency by Jimmy Carter? Wait a minute. A woman goes into the Capitol, injures 5 congressmen, and then was let go early by Jimmy Carter? All recovered, okay. Okay, but even that, assuming no deaths, I would say what happened in 1954 with this Lolita woman and the other people is worse than what happened on January 6th. Am I wrong? Okay, this has got to separate fact from opinion, right? This is my opinion. My opinion is what happened in 1954 is worse than what happened on January 6th, 2020. 2021? 2021. Did you say you think Trump is dangerous? No, I don't think Trump's... We're all dangerous to a certain extent. Even I'm dangerous. I've been told by theists I'm dangerous. But Trump is dangerous relatively? No. I mean, after he was lost the election? No. She works for the government now. They were just injured. Oh, we don't care about the injuries. I'm kidding, Jack. Well, I tell you, this has been fun with a capital F. This has been FU fun. I tell you, if you guys keep watching this channel, you granola crunchers, you'll come around. Oh yeah, tomorrow I think I'm having ex-Mormon and a Mormon come on, but I'm not sure, on the religious channel. Yeah, I'm actually gonna try to make it a goatee. Try to go all the way down. But I think it's like even the mustache is getting itchy. I hate that feeling. Off to enjoy some late night granola. Thanks, Doug. Hey, I love you, granola. No, I like you, granola crunchers. You give me hope, meaning, and purpose. Thank you, ZXCYBNMMOUSE. And Jack, as always, thank you for being the thorn in my underwear. How frequent are these live streams? Sort of irregular. I try to do it every Tuesday, but today I'm waiting on data with my job, and I had some time. Saw that Sam Harris was on Lex Fridman. I didn't at first like Lex Fridman, but he's growing on me like George Costanza. I don't think I can curl this mustache. I don't think I have the genetics. I'm not a real man. Poof.